Good evening. I would like to call this special meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting will be held on Tuesday, January 23rd at 7:30 p.m. in the board meeting room. As my chairperson's report, we have a couple of things. We've been pretty busy this week and last week. At the end of last week, we hosted all of the districts from Area 6, CABES Area 6 were invited here. We had a breakfast in the Oxbridge cafeteria. We had, I think, 7 legislators. We had a number of board members. We had 6 or so superintendents, and we had a robust discussion about reading legislation, kindergarten legislation, teacher shortages, and a couple of other matters that are on the minds of all of us. It was productive, and we thank Oxbridge for giving us some space. We thank Chartwell's for the delicious breakfast. We thank all of those who were able to attend. This morning, I drove up to Hartford for the CABE Board of Directors meeting. It was look at the strategic priorities for the organization for the year. A lot of those are focused around governance. CABE's primary role is to support boards in their governance. But in addition, there was also an agreement to have a future discussion about reading legislation, kindergarten legislation, and the like, teacher shortages. These are certainly hot topics for the year. We look forward to talking about them here at the board table with our legislators, with the State Department of Education, et cetera. Before we turn it over to what is primarily, but not completely, a budget meeting, I'd like to thank Rich for preparing a little bit of data for me. I've showed some slides previously. I wanted to again remind us of why this budget year is likely to be a contested one. This year, the superintendent's proposed budget, in the proposed budget, 4.19% of the 6.19% relates to special education, 2.58, health insurance, 1.39, and pension OPEB about 0.22. Historically, these 3 categories over the last 5 years have represented the following total increase to the budget. Pension OPEB is historically 0.08. Health insurance is historically 0.79. Special education tuition is usually down about 0.17% or flat. Pupil evaluation is historically about 0.01%. And contracted services historically about 0.04%. These categories are typically about a 0.75 total increase versus this year's 4.19. If this year's increase was the average, instead of 6.19, we'd be at 2.75. This would be a very different discussion. The Fairfield County District's budgets that have been published so far are all high. We are all struggling with increased costs. Before I go on and explain why, I want to take again a moment to say these costs are increasing. I hope that we will continue to not point fingers at why, at any program, at any person, at any entity. These are just things that are being experienced across the state and in some cases across the nation. Danbury's budget, superintendent proposed budget, is 17.5%. The reasons are health insurance, enrollment, and special ed. Westport is in at 8.83% because of health insurance. Norwalk is 8.2% because the expiration of ESSER funds, enrollment, and a school lunch deficit. New Canaan is 6.53% because of health insurance. Greenwich is 6.5%. Because of special education, substitutes, and collective bargaining agreements, and that excludes health insurance because they account for it differently. Stanford is 6.43%. Wilton is 5.56% because of special education, collective bargaining agreements, and health insurance. Fairfield is 5.5% because of enrollment, health insurance, collective bargaining, and the right to read. Trumbull is 4.9% because of the expiration of ESSER funds, grant compression, transportation, and health insurance. Weston is 3.53% because of collective bargaining agreements and the right to read. It's a tough year for everybody across the state, but certainly within our DIRG. Thank you, Rich, for giving us a little bit of context as we go into this, so we all know why we're all having hard conversations this year. This board is committed to having those conversations thoroughly together, whether we agree or disagree. to listening, to speaking, to asking, and hopefully to coming to the best solution for this community. We thank the community for their engagement so far and encourage them to continue to engage. Switching gears a little bit in terms of the format for tonight. The next item on the agenda is comments and questions from Board of Finance, RTM Education, and Education and RTM Finance and Budget Committees. Board of Finance will not be here this evening. RTM Education, I believe, is going to make a comment, and I think Beth is here. Not sure. Theoretically, Finance and Budget is commenting. We will just listen to those comments tonight, and then if there's anything you want to take from what they say, when we get later down in the agenda, we can pick them up and add them to the question and answer part. Pardon?
No.
Yes, after public comment. Thank you. So next will be public comment, then those comments and questions. Similarly, if there are comments or points made during public comment, we can also pick them up later in the meeting. After that, we'll go on to a couple of presentations. Administrators, we've all read the materials and there's quite a bit on the agenda. So we'd ask that you just hit the highlights, truly the highlights, Shirley. Thank you for your thoroughness. And that we spend the time on a lot of questions and answers. At the end, we'll get to all of our budget questions and answers. There are a lot of questions. So what I'd like to do is just quickly move through them. If there is additional detail you want on a given question, let's ask for it at that time, but we're not necessarily going to go through each and every one and have a thorough explanation unless it's the wish of the board to do so. We can also add questions during that time. I think we could, to our best of our ability, I think we can be sort of RC by RC, correct, Alan? We have different materials, but.
The questions themselves are not just RC by RC.
Okay, we'll have to. All right, well, you'll guide us through that then. And then we will eventually adjourn. With that, I'll turn it over to public comment.
Good evening. We'll start with in person. If anyone in person would like to participate, please wait for the chair to acknowledge you. You can come up to the podium. You'll have up to 3 minutes to comment. Please note the timer, the orange timer there. Please state your name and address for the record. If you are speaking on behalf of a committee, please state that committee's name as well.
Hi, my name is Kate Havoc. I've emailed with some of you about some concerns. 16 Hamilton Lane is where we live. My son is at Oxridge right now in kindergarten, and we're applying for ELP for our daughter who will be 3 in the summer. I have 2 concerns regarding the ELP changes. The first is that an application was opened for a 4-day program. Applications were released and applicants were submitted and accepted. And then we were notified that it could be changed to a 5-day program. I don't think this is fair or just to change an application after something's been released to the public. If you want to consider it for future changes in future years, I can understand that. The second part for that is the budget increase for this program. Right now at $8,000, it's about $2,000 a day to the program, but the increase proposed change is $11,500 total, which would be more than $2,000 for the 5th day. It's about $3,500 for a Friday program. I know that in the budget, there's been some comparisons to Holly Pond, private programs. Briefly, as a budget manager for the rollout of UPK in New York City, I managed $300 million, and the public school cost per child was $7,500 per student. A NYSEG student, which is a private contracted vendor, was $13,000 per head. The programs were the same. They were the same in educational rigor. They were robust. The difference is that district schools are able to offer lower costs because you have fixed costs that are already assumed as part of the district's program. Electricity, teachers have paid vacation. You don't have to pay for space. Private programs, you do have to do this. So justifying the increased cost for an ELP program based on the current costs of private programs in the area doesn't seem to be rational. I don't understand the reasons for this dramatic increase when you're justifying it as a cost based on private programs. The third concern I have is related to language studies in middle school. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Turkmenistan, and I lived and worked in France after undergrad. I would not have had this educational opportunity for a life change if I had not had language as a student in my middle school and high school. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to choose overseas as an option, but to be exposed to opportunities as a student is what education is all about. It's to spark your interest, to spark your intrigue, to spark what you want to do for your life. And to deprive our students of this opportunity it is so frustrating to me as an individual who has taken this as an opportunity for a better life for myself. It makes us more empathetic. You're understanding other cultures. And as we can see globally right now, we need to be a little bit more concerned with what's going on around us. So I just wanted to share that those are the three main concerns I have for the budget. And I really hope you strongly consider not making these changes because it'll affect us all. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Start?
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Swenson of 15 Redcoat Pass. I'm speaking tonight as both a parent of 3 students in the Darien Public Schools, a first and a fourth grader at Tokenique and a sixth grader at Middlesex, and as co-chair of the Tokenique PTO. At Tokenique, we're concerned about both the reduction of instructional aides and the reduction of 2.4 FTEs from our elementary specialist programs. My co-chair, Whitney Ranson, shared our concerns about the reduction in instructional aides in last week's meeting. Tonight, I'd like to focus on the reduction of the specialist teachers. Many of our families have selected Darien as a place to live and attend school based on both the strength and the neighborhood character of our elementary schools. Our music, art, and GEM teachers are integral members of our schools' communities, contributing far beyond their hours in the classroom. Our elementary art teachers design and build art shows that support fundraising efforts for our schools, or craft bulletin boards in hallways where a student walking by can feel proud of their work. GEM teachers and music teachers host grade level concerts, coach school-specific after-school activities, or support fundraising efforts that directly support our schools, leading initiatives like GEM Teacher for a Day. As teachers dedicated to a single student body, they have the ability to connect with our students, knowing their names and even identifying artistic and athletic strengths for a child who may not shine in a traditional classroom setting. These teachers have created a unique experience cherished by the school, and this will be lost if they're stretched among multiple schools. Would a shared teacher be expected to learn 800 names instead of 400, already an amazing feat? Reducing these teachers' time and efforts to only the hours spent in the classroom fundamentally changes the educational experience for our students. In addition, the consultant's answers in your last meeting reduced our confidence in his analysis. It seems that the proposed changes do not account for our already shared orchestra and band teachers, nor the scheduling challenges that the new model would produce. We are not confident that this initiative can be executed effectively. To conclude, we do not support the proposed cuts to our specialist teachers. We support the retention of both our instructional aides and our dedicated specialist teachers. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Vicki Coughlin and I live at 9 Canoe Trail. Tonight I will be speaking as the chair of the Middlesex Parent Association. First off, thank you all for your tireless dedication to the betterment of our children's futures. As chair, I have been soliciting feedback from our parent community regarding the proposed budget changes at MMS. The suggested 5.6 FTE teacher reductions at MMS are not being met as welcome news. The parent community has been forthright in expressing their distress at losing either an entire teaching team from 6th or 7th grade or the equivalent reduction in teachers. While the addition of another assistant principal is being presented as a standalone initiative, not contingent on the proposed teacher reduction, if forced to choose, parents would strongly prefer to retain the current staffing levels versus adding another AP. Lower enrollment is the explanation for teacher reduction, and we're told that there are too many classes that are too small. Let's examine the list of 215 classes with under 18 students. Only 30% were core subject classes. How does reducing the number of core subject teachers increase class size for 70% of these small non-core classes? In practice, does the solution put forth actually work, or do the small classes stay small and the larger classes just get bigger? The board is asked to see a sample schedule so they can understand the practicality of this proposal, but administration has said that this isn't possible because MMS scheduling information isn't available until late spring. Couldn't a mock schedule be built using the current 6th grade as an example or other historical data? Whether the teachers are reduced as a team or individually, the remaining teachers will have to teach across teams and across grades. This erodes the team model and all the benefits ascribed to it on the district website. To quote, research has shown that academic teaming leads to improved school climate, increased parent involvement, positive student social and emotional growth. positive peer-to-peer and student-to-teacher contact, and higher student achievement. If teachers are teaching across teams and grades, which team planning meetings do they attend? How does this affect the students who experience a pseudo-team model or split grade team? With the proposed reductions, more teachers will be covering a fifth class, therefore unavailable for other duties such as proctoring study hall. The district will potentially have to hire staff to cover these duties. Where are those costs mentioned in the budget? Overall, the process feels rushed, and the fear is that a proper and thorough examination of the details is being sacrificed for expediency. The parent community deserves to know that a thoroughly developed and well-vetted plan is in place to implement the teacher reductions before the board votes to approve it, and that has yet to be seen. Lastly, I would be remiss not to mention that a thorough explanation for the proposed reduction of one campus monitor has not been presented for a large building with over 1,000 students that will be left with one campus monitor and one SRO. Someone must be at the front desk at all times who will help with the traffic at drop off and pickup. The SRO, he's not at the building every day. The floating SSO, he is also not in the building every day. He covers MMS when he doesn't need to be elsewhere, but no data has been presented as to how often that actually happens. With everything the board and the community went through last year to ensure our student safety, I would hate to see a reduction in security personnel without further explanation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Vicki. Anyone else in person? We'll start online. If anyone online would like to participate, please use the raised hand icon. State your name and address for the record, and if you're representing a committee, please state the name. Morgan TA, you are unmuted and recognized. Morgan.
Hello, my name is Morgan TA, and I'm a student at MMS. I live on 10 Clocks Lane, Darien, Connecticut. And here are 3 reasons why I don't think we should cut our teachers. Number 1, big classes would impact students with disabilities. I can speak for these kids because I myself have autism and struggle with this every day. I know this because in my math class, I have around 25 kids, and oftentimes the noise that comes to my ears is a sensory overload, and cutting our teachers would make that a bigger problem. Second of all, we have a massive 4th grade class of around 378 total kids. This would result in around 125 kids per team in MMS, and also 31 kids per class. And cutting our teachers is just sort of a big waste of time because we would need to get more teachers back after this. My final reason is that kids and staff overall just don't hate our current principal system at MMS. Dr. Adley proposed a new assistant principal in the middle school and the high school, and no kid or teacher or staff member at MMS I've heard have seen a problem with this. And this is why I think we shouldn't cut our budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Christy, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Christy O'Hagan of 88 Old Kings Highway South. I currently have a 6th grader at MMS. As a resident of Darien since I was 3, I want to express how against I am of the proposed cuts of a team at MMS. This is a group of kids who lost learning as students during the pandemic. They were in very formative years for the basics, like reading and writing. This is also a group that was the pilot for co-taught 5th grade at each school because they had such needs in reading and writing. And now with the decision to cut teachers, their class sizes could become even larger and have even less one-on-one time with their teachers. Darien is a town that prides itself on the quality of the education in our schools. These decisions to cut teachers while adding administrative positions sends a message about who is valued in the schools and who is disposable. Having rainbow teachers and rainbow students breaks the team model that Darien has long prided itself on. The team model that is in place has proven to be successful as students move through middle school and are successfully prepared for high school. Dr. Adley, please don't destroy the culture of middle school and the quality of the instruction by breaking the team model. Do better.
There are no more raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Adley.
There isn't one tonight.
It's a special meeting.
Oh, I'm on the wrong agenda. Sorry. My apologies. I was looking for small materials. My apologies. Comments and questions from Board of Finance, RTM Education, and Finance and Budget Committees on the fiscal year 25 proposed budget. I see Ed, if you guys would like to lead.
Hi, Ed Washeka, 7 Lewarden Lane, Chair of the Education Committee. This will be fairly brief, and we have not had another discussion since our last meeting. So I want to say these are probably my interpretation of views of committee members. So we thank you for answering the questions that were put earlier. I have some other questions that members have submitted, and I will share those. I certainly don't envy the challenge that you all have. Appreciate the budget that Dr. Adley put forth, because he has made, or the team has made, an attempt to try to keep the increases manageable, although I still think, personally, I still think it's too high. I think, I should say, we spent a fair amount of time discussing whether the changes that were proposed in the budget were going to have an impact on students and the educational experience that they have. That said, I think some of us certainly recognize that when enrollment shifts, so must staffing. I think that the consulting that you have used in looking at the team approach certainly was very helpful to some of us in understanding how you'd come up with those recommendations. We had some significant concerns about long-term trends in spending areas such as special education, and why our experience or increase in this district is so much greater than what our peer districts are experiencing. And we felt it was important that the district should understand whether the change year over year is part of a longer term trend, and if it is, how we will be managing that. I think we didn't spend a lot of time talking about it, but we had in years past asked for more of an effort on long-term budgeting, the 5-year look forward, which you did this year. What we would ask is that someone on staff take a more real-world approach to what those increases might be, instead of just assuming the contract ends, and so we don't assume increases, or there are no changes, no new students in this program or that program. We would suggest that it would be more instructive to kind of look at historical rates of increase and to apply those over the 5-year period to understand what we might be looking at on a longer term basis. Thank you.
RTM F&B, would you like to join us?
Briefly, hello everyone. New and improved now with reading classes, so I can see what I wrote. Like the Board of Finance, we believe the Board of Ed should be allowed to continue to vet the superintendent's budget without detailed questions from us, because generally we tend to have duplicative questions anyway. But we expect to comment on specifics at a future date after further board discussions. Consequently, these comments concern the budget process generally rather than any specifics within the budget. The committee believes even with the increases in staff contracts, transportation, healthcare, and special education outplacements and services, that a 6% plus operating budget is too high and not sustainable. We feel strongly that due to the increases, the costs associated with a business as usual approach need to be revisited. One of the committee's concerns is that for a second consecutive year, the board is being presented with significant changes to strategic objectives at budget review season. We would like to understand how these tactical decisions move the district toward our strategic vision. What evidence suggests these changes will create a better educational environment? Presentations regarding proposed changes to ELP and an administrative reorganization should have been given to the board well in advance of the superintendent's proposed budget. We do, however, commend the administration and the board for the prior presentation on core growth, the 5-year plan, and the review of grants in the appendix, as the elimination of grants has also influenced operating budget growth. In sum, we look forward to robust discussions prior to the board's adoption of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from either of those committees? Okay. All right. Thank you all. With that, I'll move on to presentation, further discussion and questions on fiscal year 25 proposed budget on early learning program. Dr. Adley, Shirley Klein, and Laura Straighten.
So thank you. And if I may just make some just general comments this evening, because as we go through the ELP, the administrative restructure, presentations, the discussion with special education, and then questions and answers that the board have submitted from last time we were together, and also over the last couple of days or weekend or so. So once all of these sort of come together, hopefully they'll provide a sort of comprehensive review of the topics on the table. I will say that I very much respect everybody's input, our community's input, our teachers' input, our staff's input. I will say that this budget continues to try to build the capacity to deliver instruction, interventions for students, and mental health support for students, as well as retention of staff. We're doing that through our efficiencies, through enrollment, and through the administrative restructuring. It does not impact student programs. We've tried to protect student programs as well, not as best as we can. I believe we have protected the student programs. We have not dismantled any particular program or impacted any particular program. Students will still receive the courses and services that they're actually receiving right now. But with that, we'll lead off with our first presentation and discussion this evening around our early learning program proposal. Laura? I want to mention that Marge is here, by the way. I should have mentioned earlier, Marge is not with us at the table. She's celebrating as a new grandmother. But she is online. Laura?
Hello, everyone. I just want to bring you to the PowerPoint. You can see around the slides, I've embedded some pictures of the students in the new Oxbridge ELP setting. So as we go through these slides, I just want to point out, the different learning that's going on. So thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to review the 5-day early learning program. We're now able to propose this 5-day program because it's at one site. This child-centered decision is based on consistency, continuity, and community. Next slide. To better understand ELP's function as an early childhood setting, we will start by reviewing the staff makeup of the early learning program. So the staffing, we have program director, hello. We have 8 integrated preschool classrooms run by duly certified teachers, 1 specialized instruction classroom run by a duly certified preschool teacher. We have 3 district speech and language pathologists and 0.6 contracted speech and language for a total of 3.6 FTEs. Sorry. Farm limit. 1 school psychologist. We have an OT and a little other OT. We have a PT that's shared with Tokenique, and we have paraprofessionals to support our children. We also have an itinerant music teacher who comes through on a 6-day rotation. The consistency, continuity, and community that will develop over a 5-day program will benefit all learners ages 3 through 5. Differentiated groups and collaborative opportunities from teachers and related service providers will provide consistency over the 5 days. Okay, so this is the day in the life of the early learning program in a summary form. There's a group meeting, roughly 20 minutes to include greetings, morning news, students and sharing their morning, and opportunity to plan for the day. A closing meeting will include reflections of the day and plan for the next. Social skills lessons, music and movement, literacy, and math may also be included in these meetings. Learning centers, which you'll see across the slides, is roughly between 45 and 60 minutes, in which students make decisions about where to play and the length of time to spend before transitioning to the next play center. Examples of centers are science and discovery, math, games, dramatic play, blocks, art, writing, and library. We're on the playground for 30 minutes to include gross motor experiences. Read alouds 20 minutes during the time which students engage in reading and rereading of texts, asking questions, commenting on stories, learning about topics of studies, learning concepts of print, learning about writing. And then we have snack and lunch, which also embed social opportunities for conversation. We mentioned before, we do have music 3 times in a 6-day rotation. Currently we're at 4 days, so 6 days is an interesting cycle. So, and then we also have mystery readers.
Laura, you will forgive me, but I asked the administrators to kind of hit the highlights on each slide, if you don't
okay.
mind. Thank you.
We'll get to okay, next slide. So that's just the overview. So, in ELP, our responsibilities are the classroom activities. And outside of the classroom activities, we have team meetings, which is a special education teacher and related service folks and school psychologists meet weekly to discuss the children in the classroom and IEP goals. Evaluations, family meetings are updates on child progress, teaching families skills that we've learned to work with their children, and PPTs. We'll just go through the list there. That's a specific day. Children leave at 1:30 Monday through Thursday. Then teachers have their lunch for half an hour. And then there's teacher prep, team meetings, PPTs, and evaluations. And then Friday, proposal, the students will dismiss at 12:30. So to understand how the ELP is going to accommodate additional days, hours of students breakdown. So I just kind of gave a list of how long everything takes right there. PPT 1 is is referral meeting. It typically takes about 30 minutes. PPT 2, when we're determining eligibility or an annual review, it takes about an hour. Here's a developmental evaluation with multiple teams, special education, school psychologists, and related service members may be joining that, roughly an hour and a half, give or take. They're young. They could be 2, turning 3, or just need multiple breaks during that time. And individual evaluations can last between 30 and above. Next page. So just talk about the SRBI process. That's when we go into the community preschools, do observations, provide strategies for those community preschool teachers or families. We're looking to schedule them across the 5 days to help address the concerns about getting them done. Given the 5-day, the school psychologists and speech and language typically are the staff members who go out in the community. They have more flexibility within their schedule. They are not teaching classrooms between 8:30 and 1:30, so they have some flexibility. They would be the forefront people to go on. We have other types of evaluations, which are referrals and development. Scrolling down a little bit more. Individual evaluations and re-evals. So we either have the multiple evaluation by multiple people, or we have the individual evals. So how to accommodate? We'll scroll down there. Developmental evaluations typically would be scheduled after 1:30, Monday through Thursday, or after 12:30 on Friday. Individual evaluations or reevaluations would be scheduled based on time carved out in the day. Teachers, classroom teachers can plan groupings for students with other teachers to allow time for more evaluations. Let's see, next slide. So just remember, special education, we have 9 special education teachers. So when we design evaluations, you know, those evaluations are spread over multiple people, which allows for more evaluations completed at different times. It's just not one special education teacher doing multiple evaluations. So we talked about that. Moving to 5-day creates more opportunities for the related service providers to schedule across the 5 days instead of the 4 days, which opens up areas or prep time or evaluation times Monday through Thursday, because now we have Friday to schedule opportunities for those sessions to happen. You know, we can propose about team meetings, meeting twice per month instead of 4 times per month, or a program meeting. Currently, we're meeting 3 times per month for an hour to 2 times per month. And then talk about that. Oh, and then the final slide. I'm sorry. See you. All right, so based on all of that, you know, we do feel that we can get our evaluations done and work with children 5 days a week.
Thank you, Laura. Okay,
Hopefully that
Shirley,
was
what's that?
I wasn't watching the progression, so yes. Thank you
Okay.
for your consideration.
Shirley, do you want to add anything before I open it to board comment, or Alan or Amy?
I think I would just add, and I think Laura did when she spoke to it on Saturday, on Super Saturday. We recognize that in changing the program from a 4-day program to a 5-day program, we have a lot of scheduling considerations. I think affording the opportunity for children to come to school 5 days a week instead of 4 days a week really allows services to be done over a 5-day period, not a 4-day period. Allows opportunity for more shared evaluation structures as well. And I think that as the staff and clinicians look at ways to do that, it will better support students. I think the idea of going out into the community, as Laura said, and it's hard without imagining how the structures work, that the school psychologists might do more of those observations, allowing teachers to be in their classrooms. Or they may choose to do group evaluations. Sometimes students come in for evaluations into the building as well. So I think they've thoughtfully considered that. I know there's both points of view of it is giving to the families also. It's giving something up by going from 4-day to 5-day, but it's also gaining something. And I think the balance is that we feel going to the 5-day has more benefit for students and for learning.
Thank you.
If I could just add really briefly, I was surprised coming to Darien that our pre-K program was only a 4-day-a-week program. There is a pretty significant body of research that talks about the implementation of 5 full-day week programs for children who are in pre-K, and how that really results in the opportunity to outperform peers later, not only in cognitive domain, but also social, emotional, and behavioral. So I think it is a very sound educational decision. It's a great opportunity for our little ones. And this is a very exciting time for early learning, and especially in the state of Connecticut with the attention that's being placed on play-based learning. So I think also, you know, we'll have exciting opportunities ahead to think about what we mean by full day and what are the opportunities that we build into those experiences for students and staff.
Thank you.
I would just comment for some parents who have the concern, is it can you have the option of going to 4 days and 5 days? The same way right now, you don't really have the option to go from 4 days to 3 days. We've been saying you'd have to go to 5 days in this particular program for continuity of learning, consistency, climate, curriculum for all of those reasons.
Thank you. Okay, I'll open it up for board questions. Katie?
So Ellen, how do you answer the question that the parents have posed in that they applied to and were accepted into a 4-day program that based on this budget will no longer exist? How do you?
I do think the process is important, and I don't want to overplay that in the sense of or undermine that concept, because if you commit something to somebody, I tend to believe in general we try and we try to honor that as best we can. I'll just say that as a principle in life and anything. I try to sort of like, if we've committed to something, I would try and make accommodation somewhere along the way for that. If there's a meeting of the minds there somewhere for particular people, but if there's a transition for that that needs to be made for something, perhaps we consider that. I'd keep an open mind to that. But I'm bringing the program forward to suggest that we implement it in this way. So, but I recognize for people when you commit to something, or I would have to go back and look at the actual application and the process of that, because personally I have not talked to Laura about that particular topic. And so I'd be happy to talk it through and what commitments people have been made or they feel they've made, or they feel that the school district has made back to them.
I think if you could come back next meeting with an answer to that, that'd be great. Thank you. Sarah?
Just to compound on that, I would like to just see any communication that has been, like, if we could see the application and then what was sent out to parents and what that point is valid. Like these families did apply to a program that now we're potentially changing on them. And I just would like to understand that more.
Something on that
Sure.
point. And I'd also like to understand how that jives or doesn't jive with timing for other programs that they may have considered and didn't, or could have applied to and now can't, et cetera. If we are leaving people in a position of not having options that they would have had, if not for our timing, I'd like to know that.
Greg?
Is it possible, are we stuck on just doing one or the other or 4 days and just 4 days, or 5 days and just 5 days? Or is it possible to offer an option, 4 or 5 days, and kids who want to do 4 come for 4 days, and the kids who want to do 5 come for the same 4 days and stay for a 5th?
Well, currently under I don't know if Laura wants to answer this or not, but currently under the proposal for 5 days, we're suggesting that it stays at 5 days. I'm happy to look at the application process or otherwise to see what commitments were made or not made. And if there's a meeting somewhere in the middle of that somewhere, perhaps we do that. I can't commit to that now because I honestly haven't seen the application. I need to talk to Laura about when it was made, so on and so forth. But so I'll just have to reserve comment on that until it's reviewed.
As we talk about flexibility, I know what we're talking about is kids who can apply. I just wanted to put another alternate perspective on the table. We have some kids that we serve in ELP who don't have the option of private preschools because private preschools aren't spec'd out to serve them. I know they currently have if the IEP mandates it a 5-day perspective, but I just want to remind us that as we do have a cohort of students who's in this group that only has ELP as an option or has not many other options as we talk. Robin.
Just one clarifying question. You said that ELP is age 3 to 5. Do we have separate classes for 3-year-olds versus 4-year-olds versus pre-K, similar to other preschools in the area, which oftentimes might have a fewer day option for a 3-year-old versus a 5-day option for pre-K? And I don't know what the structure is right now in ELP, but that might allay some concerns, especially for 3-year-olds. And I just wanted to ask that question.
Laura, you want to take that one?
Sure. Currently, 3 to 5, this school year, it's a little different moving forward because of the kindergarten cutoff date. Prior to this kindergarten cutoff date of September 1st, we did mix 3s and 4s together. And, this moving forward, this new school year, we will be looking to group children that are the younger 3s and younger 4s together and older 4s and 5s together. So there will be a division based on age, we'll say, a little bit different than years past because the children will be that much older that are 5.
That's
We
the
don't
change.
offer, we don't offer a pre-K 5-year-old program for children who are age eligible for kindergarten. We believe that kindergarten will serve our children, and if families want to have that extra year, their kindergarten year in a preschool, they may do so at a different location, but typically they go on. We don't ask children to come to our program that are kindergarten age eligible.
Is one of the reasons that you looked at this program because we are, or at this expansion of the program, because we are moving to, because we've moved the age for kindergarten and we are expecting some more 5-year-olds, and so you looked at the overall program, or is that a separate?
That is a consideration. I do feel like older children, I'll say all children would benefit, but as they age up, the expectations and developmentally readiness of a child is different than a 3-year-old.
Thank you. Katie?
I just had,
Yeah.
Laura, I just want to add one thing, I think, to Robin's question. We put our 3 and 4-year-old children are in shared classrooms. I think Robin was always, are there other programs that separate their 3-year-olds and have programs just for 3? Would you let her know about that? Thanks.
Sorry, I forgot that one. So yes, community preschools do typically group children by age. So like 2s, 3s, 4s, and pre-K 5-year-old children. We do, as a program, go back to a more diverse group for the program. It's a little different than the community preschool.
Excuse me? Oh, Dave Brown had his hand up. I'm not sure if he's still. Okay.
Katie and then Dave. Thank you.
So piggybacking on this conversation, Laura, can you speak a little bit to, when you were talking about older kids typically spending more time at school, can you speak to whether all 3-year-olds are really ready for a 5-day program, if that's developmentally appropriate? And I checked back on the slide, the program runs until 1:30, and I didn't see information on the comparable schools and some of the other materials, but I think that's a bit later than a lot of preschools, correct, right? So I'm just curious about the length of day and a 5th day on top of that, and just the stamina that might be required from such a young child.
Off mute. So historically, for the last many years that I've been here, we have run the 16-hour program for the young 3-year-olds. And I would say in the beginning, they may be tired, and as they get used to the routines and the change in programming, they do acclimate to the longer day. There are children who, need a little warm-up time, and then they get in the groove and move forward. In the 4 days, they've been doing that pretty consistently. The 3rd day is a shortened day. I don't think we're adding time to the day. For stamina, it's just adding an additional day for that wraparound kind of consistency. There are children who are in daycare settings that do attend programs, from 7 to 7. This is, but not all of that time is instructional time. So, it really just depends on each child's ability. I would say the majority of 3-year-olds are able to manage the 4, and I'm assuming the 5th program. The 5 days.
Dave?
Yeah, I was we can't see you. So no, now we can. I'm just saying when you have a question, just make sure you pop your hand up so Michelle can see it. Okay.
I did that. Thank you. Just following up really with Greg and Katie's question, would love to understand the options for the 4-day, 5-day and what we have offered out there. Thank you.
Julie?
Thank you. A couple kind of little questions, I think. From a staffing standpoint, can you talk a little, Laura, about sharing the PT and the OT and how that works? And I would also love to understand if the extra or more frequent music is built into what we have been talking about as far as specials staffing reductions at the elementary schools? Because that's more music, obviously, if it's a 5-day program on a 6-day rotation now.
So like A through F day, right? So that's a 6-day rotation. We are only allowing ourselves the 4-day. So it's in the music teacher's schedule. We're just not in session to receive the full benefit of that. So being at a 5-day program will allow us to be on that 6-day rotation for special, if that makes sense. I did not hear any changes. I would speak to the board regarding music, but my expectation and understanding is that music will continue at the 3 days per 6-day cycle.
Does that effectively mean that the music teacher has a quote unquote free when
I would hesitate to say that, but
well, an unscheduled period when the ELP schedule doesn't coincide with his or her schedule? Is that what we're calling it? Or let's say an unplanned planning period?
Yeah, additional prep.
Additional prep, okay.
And then the OT.
Sorry,
and the
OT.
PT that are shared.
Yep. So we have one dedicated FTE OT. Again, in the shortage crisis of this school year, we are sharing currently some OT with Royal. They are projecting to have an OT for ELP for that additional 0.4, whatever the FTE is, but that hasn't happened yet. But we are feeling the squeeze on that additional OT, and that's between Royal and ELP. But I know they're in the works to try to find someone. The PT, it's really based on caseloads. At the beginning of the year, it's always easier to help out. And as we find children through the process of referrals, we have been able to manage currently with sharing our PT with Tokenique. So it has not become a problem as of yet.
And the 5th day, you don't foresee creating a problem.
So, having a conversation around that. So when we create IEPs, we create goals and objectives, and service hours are based on those goals and objectives. So just because we're having an additional day of school does not require, there's no mandate to add additional PT service. However, that child will be in a general ed setting longer and able to practice those gross motor skills or OT or communication skills an additional day. So that's the added benefit. So when looking at those goals and objectives, we service on those goals and objectives. Those objectives and goals drive ours.
And it looks like Marge, I think you want to add something too. Yes. Okay.
I know Marge will speak to the other disciplines, but to your question, Julie, also, when we have 5 days to do it, we could space out those same PT offerings. So it actually gives more opportunity to provide services. And it'll benefit all students. So whether Karen Albro, it's the one district PT person we have, all our other contracted services for PT are contracted out. So since Karen is a Darien employee, that gives us opportunity to really space her over 5 days and not have to squeeze it into 4.
Marge?
And I just wanted to confirm that if you look at the consultant's report, the scheduling consultant, or at the staffing formulas that we shared with the board, we made sure that there was plenty of capacity, especially at Oxridge, so that the music offered to the ELP would not be interrupted, and that we may actually have capacity to add some additional specials for our earliest learners.
Thank you. Dennis and then John.
So correct me if I'm wrong, we already have students that go 5 days a week to this program, correct? And so the ones that are going 5 days a week are the students that probably need the most intensive teaching and structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm struggling with how adding students in is going to help them get the services that they need.
Yep. So we'll take it So we have two kind of Friday students, we'll call them. So in the list of teacher and classroom design, we have that specialized instruction class where most of the students receive small group or one-to-one instruction by the special education teacher and have related services throughout that week. Going on Friday for them, you know, is not going to change other than they may be afforded more hours in their day. Because currently they're 8:30 to 11, just IEP students. And then that class would run as it is, and those service providers would provide service as they are. There's another group of students who need more of a, small group practice skills more continuously. We can think of those students as a student who would have a resource pullout time. Perhaps we will, if this is going forward, look at that and design a classroom setting so that they can continue to have that small group instruction. Or there may be more opportunities for them to practice with peer models, either identified or not, to really work on those developmental social skills. So it would not, adding peer models to Friday would not directly impact the children who currently receive special ed services during that day. It could enhance that opportunity, but I don't see it hurting that opportunity.
John, then Robin.
So, again, we find ourselves in a program discussion during budget season, so I had sympathy for the F&B comments, and that's why we're doing it. I guess, what I'm struggling with, we're talking about 0.06 budget impact. So what is the catalyst for doing it this year versus deferring it so that everybody's informed what the actual program is? The parents are all on the same page a number of days. I would support it, or I do support it, but I just don't understand what the catalyst was to bring it forth so late in this time period. So maybe somebody can help me. Is it just kindergarten?
Is it just a kindergarten factor? No, it's not just a kindergarten factor. As we look at ways of improving student programs and services to our community on top of kindergarten and that reason, we were looking at, is there a way to do that also while simultaneously realizing efficiency, right? And so it's not just an efficiency, right? We do believe it's better for kids, and if you can do that simultaneously, I don't think we'll leave that off the table.
Okay. Thank you.
Sarah?
I don't disagree that this might be developmentally appropriate for some kids, but for some kids, it may not be developmentally appropriate. And I just want to make sure that everything has been thought through very carefully. The board received some good information about ELP from parents and staff members, and it seemed like my big hang up here of doing this now in the budget season is I'm unclear as to how the additional hours that the teachers and support staff will have to put in, how they will still be able to do it was like 80 plus referrals and the PPTs and all the extra stuff that the teachers, the adults do on Fridays when the kids are not there. And I don't know how well thought through. I mean, I hope it's been well thought through. I just don't know that I've heard enough evidence to support that all those needs will be met. So Laura, I don't know if you can talk to that, or Shirley, you can talk to that, but I don't understand where the human hours are coming from.
So, scheduling services across 5 days allows more opportunity for related service providers to meet those IEP needs across 5 days instead of 4 days. So 4 days jam-packed, 5 days would be spread out more. We would, when I went through the PowerPoint, we talked about having different meetings, teachers. We would be utilizing a model that currently is used K-12 If a teacher needs to come out of the classroom, the building substitute goes into the classroom and supports the classroom. The idea of the ELP building-based sub is that she or he or they have knowledge of the programming, the children, and so the instruction, would not be a greater loss than just having someone substitute that doesn't know anything about the preschool. So having that building sub has really helped us to help maintain that continual service across the board. So we would be looking to, if a teacher needed to be released from that classroom to do an evaluation or to have a PPT, have the building sub take over on that class during that period of time. Music is a time that teachers can be released from the classroom and to provide either a PPT or a prep time. So like carving out, or again, related service providers, could be pushing into the classroom if the special education teacher needs to be removed. So there is opportunities within a schedule that can release teachers to do other duties or to have PBTs.
Yes.
Sarah just add one piece to what Laura was explaining also. So if I have 20 hours of speech therapy over 4 days, and now I can put it over 5 days, that gives me 10 hours across the other 5 days to be able to go do those evaluations, do observations. So spreading out, especially with related services, because you won't treat twice in 1 day. So you have much more limited opportunity in a 4-day than you do in a 5-day.
I would like to ask, Amy, you mentioned that a lot of pre-K programs are structured a little differently. I would love to see some comps on ELP type models from the surrounding area, how they run, if we could, please. The other thing we've asked for in terms of a follow-up is the current application process that we put out there and what we indicated to parents. I would suggest if there are additional questions that we ask them sort of for follow-up, given the hour. Dennis?
I would just like to piggyback on your point is Dr. Fedigan, you mentioned that you have data as well showing that 5-day pre-K is valuable. Do you have data showing that 5-day 3-year-old is valuable to those students as well? That I would like to see that as well.
Okay. Okay, Katie, do you have a question?
Yeah, I would just like to know how much time you're expecting teachers to need building sub coverage in order to meet the evaluations and the meetings and that load. That's a real impact on the students.
Okay, so another look at the sort of substitutes and how that model will be used, including the building substitute vis-a-vis evaluations. And
I'd really like to know like an estimation on how often they expect. Like, are we talking about multiple hours every week? Are we talking, how often will the teachers be pulled out of the classroom to do outside work?
Can I jump in? Because I had a question on that topic too, Jill, if I may. I don't believe Oxbridge is getting more building subs in this budget than the other schools, but ELP, I think, represents another 9
has its own
classrooms. They have their own
Right.
sub. Okay, so that one sub we think has the bandwidth to cover the needs. Okay, so it would be helpful to get a better understanding of what might be the requirements for that individual.
Okay, so that last one is looking at that individual building sub and how that will work compared to the evaluation, et cetera, load for our staff in terms of the impact to students. Okay, those are our 4 follow-ups I've written down. Any other follow-ups? Okay, thank you all for that. With that, we'll move on to presentation, further discussion and questions on fiscal year 25 proposed budget on administrative restructuring. Dr. Adley. Same council. Hit the highlights, please.
So just a couple of things before I start. This budget does not increase the FTEs for any administrators, nor does it do it in lieu of reduction of teachers. Regardless, I'd be looking at that reduction through enrollment, regardless of this budget. So I will say with where we are financially with the budget, I honestly, well, of course you would expect me to say this, but I believe that this is a better service for all our kids all taken globally together administratively and programmatically for the budget level that we're at. This is the best use of your administration, in my respectful opinion, and an opinion of our cabinet. I will say that administration or principals, either assistant principals or principals themselves, are second only to the quality of the teacher in the classroom for instruction that impacts student learning. Primarily, they have that impact because they create the conditions for student success and staff success in a number of particular areas. I'll also say that this tangentially also supports the recruitment and retention of staff. If you're looking at assistant principals or principals, research would tell you that working conditions, compensation, accountability systems, lack of decision-making ability, and the quality of professional learning all contribute to why people turn over. We also have had a turnover, as you know, of 47% in the last couple of years through the current contract. So this actually also addresses the recruitment and retention of staff, which has been a board goal throughout this particular year. Could you just put up this up so that people can see it, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Marge, we're going to shrink you now. So the most important thing in this is that you've got the current staff, the proposed staff was asked for. What does the process of sort of moving people around or positions around? So you can see that in the bottom left-hand corner. I'm not going to read that to you. You can see it, but the primary thing here is these are roles, and you can't really think of people per se, but this is the actual rollout of the positions. I'm happy to answer questions about it if you have anything there. The middle school department chair and high school department chair currently, we're talking about moving that over to middle school program directors. High school program directors, 10 months, 12 months. That's essentially that particular page. I'll pause if you want me to go forward. I'm trying to be as succinct as I can.
Do you want to stop and talk about special education and then stop at curriculum and instruction, stop at after middle school and high school?
Okay, well, I'm stopping
Okay,
here then.
let's do that. All right, questions about the special education remodeled, Greg?
Just a clarification on the chart. So the 5 assistant principals for elementary school.
Yes.
That's the actual elementary school. That's not specific to special education.
There are five particular assistant principals in the elementary schools who the preponderance of their job are dedicated to special education. So we're drawing in resources there. We're drawing in, that's part of the overall big picture.
Is that our structure, or is there something driving that?
So there's 10 total assistant principals at the elementary school. One's dedicated essentially for general education, though does support special education, and then one dedicated for special education, but does also support general education.
So that is our structure.
If I may just add something to that also for color, Greg. A few years ago, the board approved having a second assistant principal in the elementary schools, and that was to help support special education. The goal right now is to have about 60% of the students are with that assistant principal, and she or he, it's all she right now, run those meetings and work with those families. The other 20 and 20 are between the principal and the other assistant principal. Our goal is to change those proportions also over the years so it's more equal and more inclusive. But right now, we have 2 APs in the elementary school for all students.
Okay, and so that it seemed like in looking at some of the information you provided, Dr. Light, which is really helpful, that's like a big driver of our differential versus the DRG in terms of overall administration.
Yeah, I think that's true. The decision to go down that route. We also there used to be called SES facilitators. So there was a trade-off made at that particular point. But you are right. Our commitment to that model, and probably in all honesty, our commitment to the department chair model, are the major 2 big drivers.
Right. So have we explored alternative structures for that specifically in terms of having floaters, or, I mean, it just seems like we've got a lot more resources dedicated towards the elementary schools administratively than our peers. And if the answer is, well, we've got 5, whereas others have 2 or 3, then aren't the number of students in those schools a lot less?
Yeah, well, we've looked at that, but we're also looking at the needs of our special services population. That was literally the main driver of putting those positions in place at the elementary schools.
Greg, there was a lot of deliberation a couple of years ago. We'll get those materials to you so you can review them. And then if there's follow-up questions on that, I'm sure you have some good ones. But let's get you the materials from when we shifted from a facilitator model, which was like a teacher leader, to an assistant principal a couple of years ago.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Shirley, can you send those to Greg, please? Thank you. Robin?
Actually, can that be sent to all of us? Because I actually had similar questions also about the nurses, because I know some of those used to be in special ed. Same thing with the elementary assistant principals that are dedicated for special ed, because I guess one of my questions, just in understanding the role and the actual work that they're doing, it would seem to me that those administrative positions and or nurses actually should be in RC 24, because effectively, especially, and I know that this was changed and I missed all of that,
That's okay,
but
Rachel.
just in terms of resource allocation, when you compare across the DIRG, it seems like it kind of throws off our analysis of the comps. And I just would.
Rich, you want to take
Just a
this one?
question.
Yeah.
So in terms of the nurses, there are no one-to-one special education nurses, which is why they're not in special education. It used to be a number of years ago, the district did have some. So the nurses support all students, which is why they're in the health RC. The assistant principals that primarily focus on special education are not necessarily only special education, which is why they're not. So it is a similar model to what Westport currently has in terms of the 2 assistant principals in each elementary school. And similar to Westport, they're not as coded as a special education.
Okay, thank you.
Dave?
Thanks. It's just following on to Greg's. Just in terms of we're going to circulate information, I'm trying to recall back to the conversation when we went from the SES facilitators. Isn't there a role in Connecticut, and maybe this will be in the materials, if not, just a little color on it, where in the PPT meetings, we need to have an administrator?
Yes.
And I think that was part of the motivation. And I guess my follow-on question to that, and thank you for confirming, for instance, department chairs, other administrators, just staff in general, administrative staff, which ones would be able to participate in PPTs by statute, and beyond those that are just the assistant principals? So just trying to get my arms around who could take place in those meetings additionally, if that's not explicit in the materials, if we could include that. Thank you.
Yeah, we can answer that now.
Thank you, Alan.
And a separate follow-up on that is just like, for those meetings, like, what is the typical audience? How many people are in the room? Like, how many resources are we actually using for those meetings, and what's required versus what we are using?
Okay.
Those now?
Sure.
First to Dave's question, which is administrator considered PPTs? There are many. There's been our chairpersons, they have 092s, our APs have 092s, our principals have 092s. So they have to have a state supervisory license for that. So they may all be the administrator. You want someone in the building because they can speak to the program and the value added piece to that. So it's administrator who is known to the children, known to the staff, and part of that building structure. As far as the attendees, they involve one building administrator, a school psychologist, a special education teacher, a general education teacher, any other providers that work or being recommended to work with the student, which could include a speech therapist, an OT, a PT, teacher of the hearing impaired, teacher of the visual impaired, a BCBA, a BCABA, so anyone that's being considered to support that student's program.
Shirley, could you slow down and just repeat again? You have to have an 092, but who qualifies under that?
In our district, our assistant principals, our principals, our current chairpersons, as well as program directors, our elementary program director, ELP program director, secondary program director, myself.
When you say current chairpersons, is that all department chairpersons, or is that our 2 special education
We
department?
utilize our 2 chairpersons, which are our special education chairpersons and our high school. That said, our other chairpersons are certified to sit at those PPTs.
Okay, so I think that is a question that I've heard a couple of times is we've answered it a little bit here, but can department chairs sit in PPTs?
They would be
Yes.
certified to do that, yes.
Okay. Katie?
Thank you. I think that I'm not sure if this is the right time, but I do think that the focus on PPT meetings calls up some bigger questions as well, in terms of efficiencies. We need to discuss the Zoom and the impact that that has had on PPTs. While Zoom has made PPTs a lot more accessible in terms of people being able to attend, it's easier to convene and schedule. They also have made them more inefficient. It's very easy for people to not be paying attention, to be multitasking, to potentially even be in an environment that's not private. And I think that I've heard on multiple occasions from multiple people, part of our problem with PPT load could be due to the inefficiencies of the ways that they're being run. And I think that this needs to be looked at, especially before we jump to, large administrative salaries.
Can you look and see if there's been much difference in the number of PPTs since we looked at Zoom? Do we have that data to see if there is actually a difference? I know you're talking about there's a qualitative side to what Katie's saying that we wouldn't be captured, but I don't know if we have any data for the quantitative side of her question.
Well, I don't think it would be exclusive to Zoom. We started Zoom during COVID.
Right.
So I think the increase in number of PPTs would be due
Fair
to the
enough.
increased number of students.
Fair enough. Okay.
I do know that we also can look at how many PPTs are in person, how many are in Zoom. As Katie said, the advantage of Zoom has been that both parents very often can be at the meeting because they can do it on site. So we've seen increase. We've actually had grandparents at the meeting. We've had extended family members. So I think it's offered more support for families. At the same time, we are mindful to be focused and to be attentive and to make sure that we are clearly there for all of us, not to be multitasking or doing those activities. So we are mindful of that and we enforce that. But I do think we offer both in person and Zoom.
Okay. If there are more questions on this topic, we have special education and student services as the next topic. We can come back to it. But for the moment, let's stick with staffing, please. Questions?
Jill?
Yes.
I would like to understand better. So one of the things I like about having two special education split into elementary and secondary is I like that because we have 5 elementary schools, I like that there's somebody who knows what's happening in all of them. And that's their sole responsibility to make sure that the horizontal, we talk a lot about vertical alignment, right? But the horizontal alignment is there. And I understand that now there still would be someone overseeing that, but in addition to more, can you speak to what do you think anything would be lost in that, cohesiveness and cohesion and just making sure that each of the 5 schools is operating efficiently and as to their best of their ability?
And I think we spoke to it on Saturday also, Sarah, but I think we are confident that we have a dedicated assistant principal. We have 2 assistant principals in elementary. It's been 3 years where Kristen has been supporting them, coaching them, getting in position to really assume that responsibility. So I think that the K through 12 person will really work on bridging elementary, middle, and high school together. And we have a force, a very qualified force on the elementary level that will continue it. I know it was brought up in a concern of that some of those APs are new because there's been a changeover in the APs in the elementary school, and that was brought up. And we recognize that, and the K through 12 person would be responsible for supporting them, consistent with the way Kristen did.
I should have said, by the way, we have 2 principals on, Mrs. Dahlstrom and Mrs. Dunn are here tonight if we have further questions, but I just want to thank them for participating.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. Julie?
Thank you. Going back to something I was asking about on Super Saturday, I'm still trying to understand the evolution of these roles. So the elementary program director, I believe the explanation was that now that the assistant principals are kind of up and running, we don't need that position and we can morph that into something else. But my understanding is that's not what that position was in the first place. It just kind of became that when we brought in the assistant principals. So I'm trying to follow the thread of who's developing the programs, who's providing the expertise to the students on a macro level, in addition to also providing the administrative oversight of the department. Does that make sense?
So the macro level is my responsibility.
Yes.
That's my
Sorry,
responsibility.
I mean on a more mini macro level, so
Okay,
in the
and-
building or the elementary
And
level.
I hope I did start when I was telling the history of it, that when we began first back almost 10 years ago, at that time we had SES facilitators, and I'll make sure that the new board members get the structure of that. At that point, we really needed to bring in an elementary program director. We designed that. That's when we developed that role. There was not a role prior to that because we needed an administrator who could make decisions, who could be at PPTs and could do that and support that. So we brought in, that's when we started that position. Also, at the same time, the SES facilitators had a very focused scope of what they need to do. It was really, their focus was on compliance, facilitation, and fidelity. The idea was at that time, that was their role as a result of the study that was done in 2013. As we began to build programs, build capacity, work towards having more supervision, we brought in the elementary director. Subsequent to that, we then hired APs. And that program director took on a new role, which was really coaching, training, and developing the skills in our APs to support their respective buildings. So that was the structure at that.
And is there anything in what we're proposing now that we see as a transitional role?
So I think I'll go back to the macro. So at this point, 9 years later, what we do see is that we really want to improve our ability to look at K through 12 plus. That if we keep people in elementary, middle, and high school, it won't have the same, and when you asked the question, I think it was you, Julie, of what's the difference between my role and their role, that's more online in the buildings, working with the staff there and being a consistent person to go from elementary, middle to high school, not just at articulation benchmarks, not just 5 and 8. The other piece is there's a greater need. Our population has grown, as you've seen in the data also, and we need someone on site in middle school and high school. Right now, we have Dr. McCarthy, who really oversees middle school and high school, but he's not on site. He's basically, his home is here in the district office, and he is on call always and spends all his days and times as much as he can over there, but he's not. We're asking for our program directors to be on site, one in middle school and one in high school, to support their needs.
So Shirley, if I'm in a vacuum, I support this. I love the idea of continuity K through 12. I think that's an important component to me. I like that the program directors work a longer portion of the year than the department chairs. And I think program director is probably a more accurate description of what the role actually was. I think as we've talked about department chairs, curriculum and otherwise, our special education department chairs are typically not there because it seems that they're doing a very different job than what our other department chairs are doing. I worry about capacity when we move this around. I know we have APs and they're supposed to take some of that middle school and high school capacity, but particularly for the top two in here, who you guys do get called into complex cases and are needed in addition to having that macro level view. That is my worry.
And I think the design addresses that, Jill, and that was in our thinking. So the same way I'm able to work K through 12 and sometimes ELP through 12, that program director will have that same ability to support families K through 12. And I think that will ensure that not only does that person have the opportunity, but they can follow and work with those families consistently. We don't have that currently. We have one person doing K through 5 and one person doing 6 through 12 plus. This will put that opportunity in for another person to do it. And you won't have to wait so long to get a PPT with me. You know, the idea is that in terms of capacity, you'll have someone, and also you'll have someone who really can work with those families over the next 10, 12 years. So I think that's really important to start to begin building that. And it really is consistent with vision of the graduate and looking at that and really transitional programs. You know, our DLC, our ALC, and our transitional programs really should start in elementary school. And, you know, we've moved it to middle school and we're proud about that, but we still have more work to do on the elementary level. So I think that person will also help to support that.
Amy, you're nodding. Did you want to add something?
No, I just was not in agreement about the concept of expanding those programs at the elementary level and really looking at a K-12.
Thank you. Katie, then John.
I just want to reiterate that I think with a very complicated budget and a lot of moving parts that it's important to be accurate in our details. So we can't say that we're going to have another person to do K through 12. That's not accurate. Currently, we have 3 people at the central office level. We will only have 2. So it is a reduction. Yes, one of those roles will switch to K through 12, but it's going from 3 people to 2 people. So we can't lose sight of that. What came up at
Can
the.
I just get some clarification on that? Because I lost you, maybe.
And I like to, yes, it is, because now we have, in terms of Katie speaking about district office, so we'll talk to that. So we have a program director for elementary and a program director for secondary. Dr. McCarthy is 6 through 12, and Kristen O'Reilly is K through 5. So what we're saying is there'll be a reduction of 1 FTE administratively. However, it's not about the reduction, it's about changing the program director to be K through 12, which we think is more valued in terms of supporting students and families.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kate. Okay. At the last meeting, Marge, you had mentioned that the moving pieces in terms of a new role being created and posting was something that might be better visually. So I just wanted to follow up and say that I would appreciate being able to see this budget, like all of the new positions that are being created and need to be posted, and just have that background information on exactly which positions have to be interviewed for versus any that may be just sliding into a different role.
So I think you can see this for special education at the bottom of the page in blue, because positions that where there's a transfer, no one interviews. And then when it says post the director, that means there'll be an interview.
Go ahead.
And I just wanted to add one more piece. I think Sarah had this question about the capacity and the agency for the assistant principals in the elementary school. They're also moving to an additional 10 days in the new contract. So they have 20 days now that they'll have to be able to support that. So that also gives them more capacity.
Any more questions on this specific restructure before we moved on to the next component? I'm sorry, John, yes.
I'm just going to say another big picture. I went back to the 2021 hearings on the SES to AP transition. No, I'm not into self-harm watching those COVID-related budget discussions, but one of the general themes actually from some people sitting on this table is trust the experts. I had zero expertise in this, but we're talking about evolving the special ed program. And I won't go into the quotes, but the general theme was we had some great experts here around the table throughout the district. And if we can't trust them kind of evolving this special ed model, I don't know where we're going from here. So I'll just leave it at that.
I can tell you, I'm not getting this lady to agree a change in special education, or for her to suggest a change in special education that's not going to service our kids and families well. It's just not going to happen. And it doesn't happen. In this case, we collectively believe that this is a better model for all students.
Let's move to curriculum. Thank you. Let's move to curriculum and instruction, please.
Right, this is pretty basic. So, but essentially it continues to talk, what's the order of things? We eliminate the world language department chair. I say that quickly, but not disparagingly or respectfully. And we combine the art and music supervision. So we currently have the 5 department chairs there in the main areas, and a director of music, which is K to 12, pre-K to 12. And then it would change to the 4 and the director of visual and performing arts. I mean, I know that's fairly simplistic, but it just reiterates the change in administration. We haven't put in here any support curriculum teachers or anything or otherwise, because it's not they're not administrative positions, but.
Okay. Are there specific questions on this change? Sarah.
So I'm going to show you on my hand. I am not in support of eliminating the world language department chair. I think some people have said that it's not a core academic subject, and I have to take. I don't agree with that. I think yes, you only have to take a year of it in high school, but I do think in Darien it is considered to be a core academic subject by many families, most families, I would think. And I'm curious if you thought about another one of the rationale for eliminating that particular department was that department has fewer teachers. And I'm wondering if there was any consideration about making that a K-12 model and adding the 5 elementary Spanish teachers into that department and, maybe broadening the role a little bit and what that would do to restructure that. I'm curious people's thought, if that was thought about, or would that even be a consideration? What would that do?
So we currently have someone at the elementary level who serves as a supervisor teacher for that particular position. We looked at all of those positions. We looked at all of those scenarios along with the music department and the number of personnel they have, and so we did look at it, and our opinion was to come with the recommendation that we have right now.
I'm very, very concerned about the bandwidth of Dr. Fettigan to be able to assume the department chair. I mean, I've sat as chair of the curriculum committee in those 2-hour long meetings every month where there's a lot of great work being done in every department. And I don't see how it's possible that just gets assumed in the assistant superintendent role. I'm very concerned about that. And again, you're gonna say trust, yes, word.
Julie.
Thank you. On that topic, I guess I feel like the answer we got was why world language, why that was the department chair chosen. I still don't have a real solid understanding of proposing cutting a department chair at all. So can you tell us why you decided to cut a department chair?
So I made the decision collaboratively, but also supported the decision that we would come in with, we're not going to increase administration. This is one of the positions, I don't want to keep repeating it, but I said it at the start. If all things being equal, I would keep this position, but it's not, right? So I brought in a budget that I thought was fiscally responsible to the taxpayers. It did not increase FTEs of administrators, and it improves overall. If you take one particular item, word language or otherwise, no one has greater respect for that person, that department than I do. But if you're asking me to use the finances that we have for a full 360 administration, this is the best use of your funds, in my opinion, and the opinion of your cabinet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to middle school.
Pretty rudimentary, but again, it just reinforces if it's been lost in the process, what's happening. There's an additional assistant principal in there. I will say to you here, from middle school to high school, there's some facts in here, and I'll get to those real quickly. All right, this is where I am an expert, in all honesty, okay? Middle school, which is huge, and the high school, which is just as huge, right? Needs an additional assistant principal. Now, you may not believe that, okay? But I'm telling you from experience as a superintendent, as a high school principal, as a high school assistant principal, as a high school department chair, it needs those positions. We have tried to validate some of it here for you, and I'll speak to it in a moment. The questions, there is a day in the life. In fact, we put in a week in the life. Your two principals put in they took 1 week just randomly, and they put it in what that would look like, and that's all flushed out in the questions to follow. But this is the basic thing again. If you want me quickly just to go to some of these reasons, I'll just transition to this. But listen, there are a couple of buckets and areas where it's needed. It's instructional, teaching and learning section, as instructional leaders. It's responding to students' needs, everything from personalization, relationships, support for special services, the climate and culture. They commit to and contribute significantly to a greater climate, a more positive climate and culture through being visible. Your principals, and I'm sorry if I say this in front of them, they need to be out more. Your assistant principals need to be out more. And it's just, and you can't just do it from behind the door of your office. They need the visibility of the assistant principals and themselves around the building. They have other responsibilities. You see that the two principals that are online here, they have delineated what those are. In many ways, the middle school is similar to the high school. If you don't mind, I'll quickly zoom through a couple of slides and then we'll stop. And is that okay? We just put in the ratio here for administration to students. At the middle school, it's 1 to 40. This is for IEPs. At the middle school proposed, if we have another assistant principal, you can see it's 1 to 36. And even then, you're quite high compared to the other districts. A question we had was about teachers. Well, our teacher to IEP ratio is actually one of the smallest, and if not the smallest, in our comparative schools, surrounding schools.
Is that with the current staff or is that with the proposed staff level?
Well, it's
Not administratively, teacher-wise.
Well, teachers is
We're looking at it,
teachers is the same.
the ratio would stay the same.
Special education teachers.
Yes, special education.
Specifically.
I'm sorry, not general,
not general teachers.
Caseloads, caseworkers.
Caseloads, thank you, sorry.
Dr. Edley, can I just ask one question? When you're saying admin to IEP ratio, what admin are you including in this chart?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. Thank you for that. That is a very good question because there's two different ones here. This is for the all administrators at the middle schools, including this one.
Including department chairs?
No. Okay. So this is currently our 3 administrators who are sitting in those meetings.
So can you tell what positions exactly?
There are 2 assistant principals and 1 principal position.
So this is the proposed.
No, this is currently.
Adding an additional, sorry, so we have 2.
Then the proposed is to the right of it.
And
If
the
we add a third.
Okay. And can I just ask one question? I have probably a broader question, which we'll get to more at the high school level, but one question that kind of jumped out at me with this slide, looking at the admin to IEP ratio, given what we're talking about here is a restructure or reorg to add, or not a reorg, but to add an additional assistant principal who serves all students. I would think that the appropriate ratio would be the admin to student ratio, as opposed to looking at an admin to IEP ratio. Because what we're solving for here is the fact that we have all of these PPT meetings. And I'd like to kind of have a discussion, and we'll get to this more in the high school slide, about if you talk about our admin and also compared to the DIRG where we have 7 department chairs or whatever that number is, including special ed, or they become program directors. If you use department chairs and have them help lead PPT meetings to lighten the load off or spread the load from the assistant principals so that the assistant principals can really focus on their, I would think, primary role of all of those other responsibilities that you just listed, wouldn't that better serve us? Because then also the department chairs would get direct feedback on what instructional or curricular things we might want to do differently and have that into the curriculum revision cycle. And I would think it would also be a fulfilling role for them to have that connection with families and students. And I know this is a very large conversation, but
I'll try and simplify that. I appreciate the consideration, and we would not say it's mutually exclusive that some of our department chairs, particularly for professional growth and opportunity, that they get exposed to some PPTs, but there's also work that they have to do too. So we've spent a lot of time talking about their level of work. I wouldn't preclude it, but it wouldn't be the preponderance of the model, and it wouldn't be as efficient as or as productive as this model as we're suggesting.
Sure.
But that's an opinion. Right?
Did you want to, I think Shirley wanted to add something.
So just for information, currently the special education chairpersons, and if you remember the chart that I have in terms of their responsibilities, they typically don't chair PPT meetings. Their responsibilities have another host of importance. They may do designated meetings and they work with certain families based on their expertise. I think I spoke to that. One of our chairpersons has extraordinary expertise in reading instruction, so we may ask her to chair certain PPTs, but they don't. Our program directors do. So in the model, when we bring program directors into on-site in middle school and high school, they will be able to support some of that.
Katie and Dennis.
Wait, sorry, one more piece. Sorry. But, I just for background also, Robin. So the program directors have a special education expertise that our chairpersons, not the special education chairpersons, but the other content area chairpersons don't have in terms of meetings. And that said, I understand that APs, our special education APs in the elementary school also have that level of expertise. I think our APs in middle school and high school have developed those expertise based on the hundreds of PPTs they've done and the work they do with families year after year. So I think that's why the current distribution we have has not involved our current chairpersons on the different content areas, which I'm speaking to basically social studies, science, and math.
Right, I think I
And
was
world
talking
language.
more about when you're talking about the proposed addition of 2 additional assistant principals. Because I guess my understanding now is that you're saying 40 to 50% of their time is being taken up with PPT meetings. And it would seem that we are potentially asking to add additional assistant principals to solve an issue that I would view as not primary to their role. So why not spread that out among all of the administration that we have? When you look at the chart across the DIRG, about Darien has 36 administrators, which is second highest in the DIRG, and that includes all of the department chairs that a lot of the other districts do not have. So I'm just trying to have a conversation about that, because the addition of 2 assistant principals is it's a large budget item. And we currently have very valuable staff in department chair roles who I think are extremely well qualified and certified to participate in an admin role in PPT meetings. And given the number of PPT meetings that we have, I just think that would be a discussion we should have.
And if I may just add to that, I think we spoke to it on Saturday, Robin, but maybe I wasn't explicit. The difference in design is that, and I think we'll take a department chair, we'll take humanities, okay? The difference in the high school model is the APs loop with those students. So they spend 4 years with them. That may not happen when you have that humanities person may not be the person who's with that kid that year. So you don't really have any continuity of following that student, and it really makes a difference, especially in high school. The difference in the model in middle school, where they do by grade 6, 7, and 8, by distributing 1, 6, 7, and 8. Currently, the principal is sitting as the chairperson on grade 8. Having another AP would really distribute among 3 APs, which would really free up the principal also to be able to be working in classrooms with students and supporting teachers and leading instructional leadership. So that's the difference why if you take one chairperson, that said, it can be done. There may be times you can do it, but I wouldn't rely on that as the best practice of how to really follow students year to year. That's the biggest difference.
Okay, thank you. Alan is asking if he can just finish the high school. Are these middle school specific questions?
We can go back to middle school or high school. It's just the same thing. So if I can just relatively put it up and then.
Yeah, I was picking back off of Robin that I think that the slides that we got in the supplemental materials paint a more accurate picture than this slide that's up here. I had the exact same concern that she did, that this is being very narrow and is giving you a very different ratio. When you look across the school, when you look at it holistically, right? And that is how we want to look at all of our students, whether they have an IEP or not. We want to look at them as a Darien student, as a member of a middle or a high school, not just by classification. There are very different ratios. I think this conversation would be better had to put those numbers up there. And you will find that the high school is already at the low end of the DIRG. The middle school is right in the middle. And I do feel like the conversation around the ability of department chairs to chair PPTs is being unnecessarily confused. We also established at Super Saturday that there is potential for department chairs to loop with students for 7 years, a continuity that is much greater than we have had before. So it's not that it's not possible, it's that decision hasn't been made. And it is something that we currently possess in-house.
Are you specific to middle school, Julie?
What's burning?
It works for both of them. I can wait. Sorry.
I got an answer to that
We
one.
should take care of that.
Go ahead and finish, Alan.
So Katie and Robin, you are right. Some of the other facts I'm happy to.
That's fine.
We'll be happy to talk to those. The same sort of thing is for the high school principals. And if you don't mind, just when I conclude this, I'd like my 2 principals, they haven't been primed for this. I haven't said I'm going to call upon them, but a comment or 2 from them might be useful. So the high school is going from 3 to 4. These are the I'm not going to read all of these, but it's for the same instruction. And teaching and learning and instructional leadership is a big part of what an assistant principal, all of these buckets are actually, should be doing. And honestly, they just can't get to those things. This is the ratio again for our service providers and also our administration to the IP ratio. And those numbers, you can see what those numbers are. These are the particular roles. I'm just going to stop here because later Shirley can talk about the changes in the roles. How is the assistant superintendent different from a program director? How is a program director different from the department head? So we can deliberate that further. So I just wanted to finish that before I started or I paused again. And I'm happy to pause again right now.
So maybe Ellen and Carolyn were going to say something and then we'll take some more questions.
Well, they weren't primed to, but
now they are.
But I think they should.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, Dr. Adley. I appreciate the questions and I certainly admire our department chairs. I think you all know that. They've been colleagues of mine for a long time and their expertise is extraordinary. I would say that, if you asked me 8 or 9 years ago when we started to have assistant principals leading the PPTs, I felt I didn't appreciate as much as I do now and over those years how important that particular role is to I think our students, their growth over time, and the consistency of a small team leading those meetings, working with both our special education staff and our general education staff in doing what is best for the growth of our students over time, and having an administrator who is not necessarily, as Shirley said, an expert or in special education, but is an expert in our school and our students and in our curriculum over time. And so I do believe that that leadership has been essential to the success of our special education program at Darien High School for our students. So that would be the only thing I would add, I think, to the conversation.
Ellen, can you fill in some more conversational gaps about the experience outside of the PPT? I mean, we certainly have our list and Alan has touched to it, but in your words.
I think when we were talking about the day in the life or the week in the life or a month in the life, it is a changing, constantly evolving and responsive role. And it is very hard to predict what those needs are. And you see all of the responsibilities that are really exciting opportunities for our school leaders to interact with so many stakeholders in our school system. I would say that, the demands of what comes up on top of those things and the expertise that they bring to that, it is absolutely invaluable to not just to the principals, but to the entire staff and our families and students as well. So it is not always the most popular role in a school system, but it's a very, very important role. And when people do it very well, as our assistant principals do, it really makes for an outstanding school. And I would say that they're a very big part of that.
Thank you.
Carolyn, Dr. Dawson?
Ellen said it very well, just about the assistant principals and how integral they are to the model of the middle school. Ours is structured a little differently where they are by grade level because it really fits the team model that we have. The assistant principal knows the teachers, they know the teams, they know the students, they attend meetings where students are discussed and plan supports. They get to know the families. So I think that this is really a opportunity to have more of that support for families and students by having that other assistant principal to be responsive to the needs. Again, as Ellen said, those responsibilities that were shared don't include the day-to-day responsiveness to students. We know that their needs have become more complex, and you really can't predict what occurs during the day outside of those planned meetings.
So if I haven't made this clear to the board, you'll understand that if I do make it clear. Well, first of all, this is also an efficiency, right? So the whole administrative repackaging, it's FTE neutral and it's an efficiency. But it also comes as a package because, I'm just, honestly, I'm not going to be able to support it because one depends on the other. We've got assistant principals then would be picking up the evaluations example from world language as an example, right? We can't just say, okay, I don't like the assistant principals, but we'll take the world language, right? That's not going to work. The special education is dependent upon the additional assistant principals. For it all to work as an efficiency at a 0 FTE, it all has to sort of be taken together and considered together. I don't know if I've made that explicitly clear, but.
Can I just ask one question?
Yes,
So
of course.
what I was talking about is if you did utilize the existing staff that we have in the department chairs, then that also would serve the purpose of working, I would believe, in helping to spread out the PBTs and that work that would help the special ed reorg to work efficiently and eliminate the need to add 2 additional assistant principals. At least that I was looking at it as another 0 FTE, basically budget neutral kind of change. But in fact, you actually would eliminate the need to add 2 additional assistant principals because you'd be utilizing your existing staff in a way that could help spread the load across all, and I would believe also help out with curriculum revision, instructional practice, feedback to teachers down the road that potentially could end up helping us on the instructional front end to decrease the number of PPT meetings that we have going forward. If you're able to address through your department chairs improvements in our curriculum and the way that we teach to help address the needs of the students better. And that was also the way that I was trying to look at it. Like, why do we have the department chairs in the first place? I would think one of the reasons would be exactly that, to help us improve and meet the needs of all students, including special ed, over the longer term to help improve revised curriculum, revised instructional practice, and really take a close look at it. So again, that was part of why I wanted to explore that. And I understand maybe there's not the same level of consistency over a number of years, to your point, Shirley, but given that we have all of these people in our staff already who are all excellent at what they do, I just thought that might be something that we would want to talk about.
Maybe you guys, since we've kind of chatted about it a little bit tonight, you guys could come back to us at the table, take some time to just talk about what you did think about and the reasons.
Well, we did think about that. I mean, I'll just be honest with you, I can't think about it anymore.
I'm not asking you to think about it anymore. I'm just asking you to articulate it so that we just have something in print for the moment. And then if there's more to push on, we can. But I think given the hour, I would suggest that we just put together follow-up questions specific to these. So the staff will take that as a follow-up. Greg, do you have a follow-up question?
Just real quick, it's piggybacking on what Robin's saying. I appreciate her line of thinking, but I mean, when I look at the numbers that were sent around and I compare versus Buchanan, when you just add up the just total assistant principals for all the different schools plus department chairs, we've got 22 people. Buchanan has 10. How are they able to service and provide the same level of service with 50% of the resources?
So we committed to certain models, and at times, I think it's the right thing to do in certain times to, just because New Canaan did something or doesn't do something or some other surrounding district doesn't mean to say that that's the right way to do it. That's why we have local control and making value decisions on certain things. We also have in that chart, when we get to it, it assumes that it assumes by the chart that 80% of the department chairs are at the high school when we're comparing by high school to high school. Like really, it's 50 and 50. They should be 50% and 50% from the high school to the middle school, even though they're in the RCs by 80 and 20. That brings it more in line with a surrounding district that would be similar to us. But there's no doubt about it that the commitment to ELP as a director, the commitment to the department chairs is definitely sets us apart a little bit. But also it's offset a little bit by the way we have it registered at the high schools 80 and the middle schools 20. It really should be 50-50.
But if it is 50-50, it actually puts us right in the middle of the DIRG in terms of the ratios
So
to students.
part of the comparison with New Canaan, we do have more elementary schools. We have 5 versus their 3. So there's a factor there. The department chairs in New Canaan are teachers. They're not administrators. That's one of the main differences that you see in the number of administrators in Darien versus New Canaan. And then the other, main difference is a few years ago, the board did commit to adding that second assistant principal, primarily because of the high identification rate in Darien compared to New Canaan. So those 5 positions, but plus the department chairs, plus the fact that we have 2 more elementary schools really drives the difference in administrators for Darien versus New Canaan.
Yeah, I think the dual role of the department chairs really goes to what Robin was saying earlier.
I would like to ask that for each of these administrative restructures, that staff come back with something in the neighborhood of 3 measures that we would use to know that we're successful. Like how at the end of the day are we going to know that we did what we said to do? There's a lot of text about things that are possible and things we're expecting, but really at the end of the day, what's your template? How are you going to know that your program change was successful? So we could give us a little bit of a framework to think about what we're trying to accomplish in a pointed way, please. Julie.
These can be follow-ups if that's better. 2 quick things. I would love to understand better. It sounds like we're looking to have more capacity for assistant principals to be engaged actively in instructional leadership and supporting teachers and staff. I want to understand the connection between assistant principals and I understand org charts are kind of clumsy things, but the column of instruction and curriculum, which they don't dot to in any way presently. So I want to understand how that happens in actuality, what the process is for APs to work with curriculum and instruction and thereby bring it into the buildings at a more robust level. And then the other question I have is on the middle school and the high school admin to IEP ratio, teacher to IEP ratio page. We have in the materials that were for tonight's meeting a chart that breaks down K to 12 caseloads, and I can't reconcile the numbers in that document to what is on this ratio page when I look at special education teachers and students that they're serving. So I'd like to understand how those ratios were arrived at. Thank you.
Okay. Any other follow-ups? Dennis.
Yep, so you stole my point on the success part. I think that was a key factor in this, or key part that we're missing. Rich, you mentioned that New Canaan has their department chairs are teachers. Does that mean they cannot have a 092 certificate to chair a PPT, or can they?
They are not 092 certified administrators.
Okay. And then the one thing which is gnawing at me is it feels like we're putting different models together. So in an elementary school, we brought assistant principals in to deal specifically with special education. And now in middle school and high school, we're bringing assistant principals in to divide the workload of special education. Why?
Okay, well, that's for follow-up.
I just
That's for follow-up.
yeah.
If it's fast, but it's not fast.
Can I just add one other comment regarding Mr. Maroney's comment about the 092 and what their capacity is in, for example, New Canaan? Not only could they not chair a PPT, but without an 092, they also could not support, supervise, and evaluate staff. And so I think one of the things that you might hear likely from Mrs. Dunn and Dr. Dahlstrom, or they would probably just not in agreement, is the fact that the expectations for supporting teachers for professional learning, observation, and evaluation are also facilitated by the department chairs in this district. New Canaan, that wouldn't be the case without an 092.
Okay.
Just wanted to add that piece.
So with that, the chart that we have is divided up between just administrators and not, or is it people who have a 092 certificate?
Which specific chart? There's a lot of charts.
The one that shows the
So the one that has all the different positions like that are
Yes.
just people with 092s.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you all for that. We have 6 items for follow-up. Materials from the original AP discussion, the success facilitated AP, some department chairs information, measures of success, and understanding of the explicit connection between APs and instruction and curriculum, reconciling those caseloads between the 2 sets of data, and then a better understanding of the models of elementary versus middle school, high school, and how that intersects with special education. With that, I'll move on to presentation, further discussion and questions on fiscal year 25 proposed budget on special education and student services. Dr. Adley and Ms. Klein.
Charlie's going to walk us through.
It's sushi.
Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
If I may begin?
Yes, please.
And being respectful to the chairperson's comment, I'm going to be just ask for any other color you might ask that I give to the answers. We tried to be very responsive to your questions. If there's anything we missed, I certainly will try to address it now, but try to look at all the different questions that were asked on the Saturday and the subsequent questions that were forwarded to the chairperson or to Dr. Adley. And I think we did, just to speak about any other opportunities of looking at bringing in-house support services on the first one. We spoke about the idea of being able to have RBTs. We have been training our paraprofessionals to be RBTs. We've supported several of them. Actually, Laura Straighten helps to support that program year-round in training that. I think what will happen to be increase the opportunity is based on the new collective bargaining agreement, which will make it more competitive for many of our personnel to be able to take on those roles and train them. So we're hoping to be able to shift to more of our own RBTs. That shift also goes with BCBAs and BCABAs who support RBTs. We looked at OT and PT. We look at that every year. It still is more fiscally responsible and more available to have them move from building to contract for those services. That's the exception of one PT that I mentioned earlier, Karen Albro, who we have in the district. Rich had mentioned that the idea of adding our own ambulatory bus that we can be able to transport will help to offset some of the costs also and give us more independence as well and be able to support students throughout the day. So those are some of the opportunities. I also spoke about speech and being able to train some of our people, but I did say also we'll continue to contract for certain services like feeding and swallowing and other specific areas that still better meet the needs of our students. I mentioned we've been training many of our speech therapists to be prom trained, and we'll continue to do that for new therapists, and we have 2 coming in that will be training this year. Any questions, or I can just go through and then just pause upon questions? So it came up in an understanding of what programs can be created in Darien to the growth of outplacements. And I hope I did address this last time we spoke about our goal is to have all our students in our schools. And when we're not able to service our students, our PPTs recommend outplacements, and we spoke about that at our prior meeting. I think we are looking at and continue to look at some of our research and scientific research-based instruction. We do that in our multisensory reading programs, such as Wilson or Spire. We do that in our introduction to social and emotional learning, such as Michelle Garcia Winner and different social thinking strategies. And we do that also in collaboration with general education in all our practices and looking at the science of reading, as well as our math program that's been a very robust training for all staff this year. Go on. I believe one of the board members had asked for us to break down the out-of-district placements and for both PPT placements as well as unilateral placements. We did it by classification. We were asked to do it and show it by grade level and by the programs that are either state approved that the district may recommend. And just want to add some understanding to the unilaterally placed out of district programs also. They are not state approved programs and a district cannot recommend those programs. And often in collaboration with families, we work to help support some of those placements also in some of the non-state approved programs. For instance, there are some students who need a more in a residential program that's really not state approved, but they've not been able to be accepted to state approved programs. That's an example of where we would help support those programs. There are families that choose to place their students out of district programs in the other areas that you see of classifications that we may also help to support.
Just a note on that graph of that chart. I think it's important to note that these are only the unilateral outplacements where families have worked with the district to help with compensation for that. So,
Thank you.
for example, for dyslexia, I think there's a much larger number of students, children in Darien, who parents choose to unilaterally outplace them, but don't involve the district. So we just have to, it might be a little inaccurate.
You mean that there are students who, families where children go to schools that service their specific learning disability or confluence of learning
Right.
disabilities where the relationship, where they remove the children from the public school system. And so they
Correct.
would not show up in our enrollment
Correct.
numbers in any way.
Correct.
Just clarifying what she meant.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Shirley.
The next I don't know, I'm on the difference between the proposed director of special education. I can't click on the link to that, but you had a chance to look at that link. I tried, and I hope it's in color on yours, because what we tried to do is show, Julie, I believe you had asked the difference in terms of my role in the K through 12 role. If you notice, I hope it is in color. On the first 5 items on program director, it shows those are consistent with the director of K through 12 as well. And it identifies that monitoring IEP compliance, scheduling and finalizing PPTs, leading instructional processes, evaluation and supervision of staff. And the following 2 are both responsibilities that both a program director and the K through 12 director would have. I don't know if it's in color, but I showed in color. It is good. It shows that. And mine, the one that is similar is I monitor IEP in district, but it's district compliance, not just the school level compliance. And the rest are in the job description, I believe, that Marge provided as well.
Any questions on this? Thank you, Shirley.
Do a comparison. I do want to apologize. That appears twice in this document. So if you found that error, we have the same chart twice. And I want to give more color to that also, but the area, if you clicked onto it, you saw, and there's a chart, and I don't know if we can do it there. Can we, Michelle? Just so anyone watching it can see. I'll speak to it. It's only 2 areas. I showed that in the DIRG, the 2 areas that we are higher in are in the classifications of speech and language and other health impairment. And I just pointed that out. It does appear twice in that. Just to show those are the 2 classifications. I think a conversation went on about classifications, so that does show there of what our identification rate is. I'll speak later to other aspects to our high identification.
Shirley, do we have any color behind what would be driving either of those?
I think I spoke last time. Speech and language impairment is a higher classification, might include children who also may be on the autism spectrum disorder, and you might see that in there. Other health impairment really does very often involve children who may have emotional disabilities, as well as other health impairments.
Thank you.
The next area we looked at were why are we not looking at teacher caseloads? And it shows the caseloads at the middle school. I know we spoke to those ratios, and we're going to look further into that based on the conversation earlier, and at the high school as well. Later on in my information, we did all the caseloads. I think you had mentioned that. And the question is, how do they compare to the ratio? So that's something for our more homework, but I will speak to that after.
These are averages though, Shirley, here in this table?
Yes. On the next question also, when we showed, if you look at the prevalence rate in response to the enrollment rate question that was asked, if you look where we are, we're actually right in the middle of the DERG. And again, I think I was asked to look at the last 10 years. So we looked at 10 years from 2012 to 2022 in terms of prevalence. And I think what we want to point out that we were the highest back in 2012. We began as the highest. And as you can see, the other districts in our DERG also increased over those 10-year period. And where we lie in the DERG percent change is about in the middle, a little bit below the middle. So I just wanted to share that data.
Just touch on some of the recommendations that have been at the top. It says typically the recommendation has been unsustainable. I think that's what it's supposed to say. What are some of those types of recommendations that haven't worked out?
So we had looked at some of the question. The board, of course, can at any time decide that you'd like to have an audit and do that. Very often the audits that we looked at, and there were 2 other districts that do it, very often audits to come in to see how to be more efficient in the services or look at efficiencies. One that Rich and I had looked at also showed how they had cut several paraprofessionals, thinking that that would be okay in terms of addressing students' needs, and they had to hire them all back. It was unsustainable. So I was just referencing.
Okay.
Next, in terms of the amount of PPT meetings we have, I thought it would just give some color to it if you know the different kind of PPT meetings that we're required to have. So we listed them for your information. I was asked to see what would a reasonable average be. So I said perhaps 2 to 3. And again, that can vary based on the family's need and how the student is doing. But I tried to come up with something that would be a reasonable average. And it lists the different types of meetings that we are required to have for students.
Julie? Thank you. Back to what we were discussing earlier regarding PPTs. Is it, to ask it another way, can we look at the frequency of or the rate of PPTs and how that compares to 5 years ago to get whether it's because of the Zoom option or anything else? Is there any way to look at, has there been a change in how that happens? And if we see that, yes, there's been a market change, despite the fact that there are more students with IEPs, are those IEPs now bringing forth more PPTs than they
Okay.
used to?
I'm not quite sure I could do that, but I would start by, I mean, I can speak to myself. Mine have been consistent over the years. I can speak to that, but I think the best way to respond to that properly would be I can reach out to colleagues and get some feedback from them. And maybe I could just do it randomly, or just I do elementary, do middle, do high school, and look at some different and get some feedback from colleagues.
Is the question, has the number of PPTs per student changed?
Basically.
Is that the question?
So
Over time.
It'll be qualitative data, it won't be quantitative data, but I can certainly reach out to colleagues and see what they can inform.
Okay. And why would it not be quantitative? Why do we not know how many PPTs we've had per student over time?
Well, you can go depending on I can go back, in other words, in order if I want to know how many, I could tell you an average about how many I do, but I don't have a way to do a running list of how many PPTs I've actually attended in the last 9 years.
It's because
Well, we
there's
do a
not-
lot of staffing based on the amount of PPTs, so
but-
it seems like we should have that information.
I mean, if I went to IP Direct, historically, I probably can go back and I could run something from IP Direct.
Okay.
But I'll look and see what we could do electronically. I'm not quite sure. I probably can go through my calendars, but I think if there is a way, I'll find out if there is a way.
Thank you.
I don't think I can do it in Connecticut SEDS yet. Okay.
Okay. Well,
But
there's
but we-
only part of a year.
Okay, but we have IP Direct.
Okay.
The next we looked at the 143001, looking at tuition, non-public school. We've answered in terms of the percentages. The other line we looked at, we were looking at out-of-district tuition payments and why that significant increase. For 2024-25, we're looking at 87 students projected in that time. And that explains that increase. The presentation I think Laura gave her presentation, so I don't know if there's any more color I can give to that for this evening. But we'll follow up on the board's questions related to that presentation this evening. We tried to explain, and I think we did, in terms of the BCBA supports that we have and the contracted services and how that supports students in the respective buildings. The caseload link, if you can see that anyone has it, shows the caseload. We identified them by student, by teacher number 1, teacher number 2, SLPs, as well as our psychologists. And I think that was a request from a board member also, and shows the current caseload of students.
And are these, given the higher identification rates, are these relatively consistent over time? What are we looking for teachers to have? I know we've talked about this before. What's the
It's
ballpark?
hours, it's hours.
It's hours.
It's really hours. It's how often a child is seen. And I think the example is you can have 6 students and have every moment that you're working with students, and you can have 17 students.
Thank you.
This is the redundant question. I apologize with the DERG average, so I'm going to skip that one. We were also asked to do a 10-year historical prevalence rate for IEPs. You can see before you, it was distributed by student count. The next one were the number of IEPs for the past 5 to 10 years, and we also were able to show that with learning disabilities. There is a footnote there that explains it. So that learning disability includes not just learning disability, specific learning disability, dyslexia. The state doesn't disaggregate it, although they should disaggregate it, but they don't disaggregate it. So our learning disabilities ratios that you see and that are reported and that we report include, and I gave a definition of different areas and processes of learning disabilities that are not exclusive to dyslexia, but can also be written language in different areas, including mathematics. That really answers the next question as well.
Greg, did you have a question? Okay. Sorry, you just looked at. Yeah.
I think we gave our description of how we assess success of our students, and I think we've spoken that before in terms of progress monitoring and different ways. We have IEP progress reports. At annual reviews, decisions are made based on the success of each student, and there is data to support that, and those are the conversations that happen at PPT that measure student success individually. I think we did caseloads and show where we're doing on that. We went on to how many PPTs are chaired by administrators and principals. I know we've had a great deal of discussion about that, and that was the 60-20-20 ratios as well as middle school and high school. I think we answered, I hope we did comprehensively, the areas of LD and state approved appropriate standards that we have to comply with. We looked at some of the information to have just for your information about when things changed in 2015, which is when the state did have a new classification of SLD dyslexia. So we just wanted you to have that for your information. We spoke about outplacements on the next question, and we explained and responded to your question, I believe, over the past 5 years. We spoke about our professional development and strategic 3 to 5 year plan. The last on that page is about special education cost for fiscal years, and we showed actual budgets and the trends of that. And if you look at the percentage of budget in the last column, it shows that it has been fairly stable, although in different areas that led to that.
So Rich, can you help us parse out, while the percentage of the budget is relatively stable, the percentage increase is less so? Can you explain that?
So with the exception of the budget before you, largely special ed has been relatively stable. I mean, there's obviously been increases in different lines. We've actually seen typically the tuition line item either be flat or down. We've seen increases in contracted services, whether it be speech, PT, OT, et cetera, consultant services. The big difference in what you see in 24 to 25, and you see it with, a 0.5 point of the budget growth, is the tuition line item is much higher. I mean, that's 1.5 million increase alone. So, thinking about the budget as a whole, I mean, that right there is a driver over 1% of your budget. And then that coupled with increased costs for things like speech, increased cost for pupil evaluations, that's driving the number that you see in fiscal 25. But historically, what you've had is, again, you've had relatively flat or down tuition, which has kind of offset some of those increases that you've seen, or you've seen growth increases in excess cost reimbursement. And so when you net those all together, it's been relatively flat. This year, you have growing expenses, growing provider costs, and then reductions in excess cost reimbursement.
And the tuition number is up because of increases in actual cost of tuition.
So it's
And
so it's a combination of inflationary pressures where
Yeah.
we're seeing, rising costs. It's an increase in the number of students within that allotment of funds.
and the increase, just to add to that, Rich, of student need.
Student need.
And it really is. And if there are more complex needs, those programs, we have to search for those programs and find programs to support that.
Just, Jill, just one question on the out of district. So that on one of these slides, it was saying that 50% of the increase is due to new or pending out of district settlements or placements. How many students are we budgeting, or is that not for public?
It is in the document, it's 87 students.
So it's 87 that are the new.
No, 87 in total.
Total. Right now, it's 43. If you remember, the other numbers were 33 and 43, so that's what we currently have. And this is projected for next year is 87.
87 total, but how many, there were 50% that were new as opposed to current students that are continuing. And there was a percentage breakdown.
So the percentage breakdown is the percentage of the cost. So in terms of new, it's about 10 students. New. So part of that is also, you have a tuition deficit this year, right? So you have to make up the gap in the tuition deficit plus any additional students that have not yet been placed or expected to be placed or settled.
Okay, thank you.
John, then Katie?
Yeah, just if you didn't do the math, that's 93,000 per student average. You divide the simple math, so it's sizable.
Katie?
It's just looking to reconcile, the section above, two above, says that the number of students in outplacement or unilateral placement has decreased in the past 5 years.
I showed that in the chart in the last presentation.
Yeah, I'm just, how are we reconciling that? Like, how is that possible when we have a tuition deficit?
So whether it's a settlement or a placement, they're like contracts, right? So you have a start date and you have an end date. So while the number is down, it's not down as much as it was anticipated. So we've had, as we've shared in finance committees, whether it be new placements or new unilateral agreements that have occurred. So they're new, but they're still more than we were anticipating. So really, when you're going against budget, it's what did you anticipate you were going to have based on the existing agreements? I mean, it's a watch list students that you were expecting to happen. What happened above and beyond that? So while the trend is down, it is over expectation.
Okay, thank you, Shirley.
I think there were some questions asked on the next one that we went through and gave. They were hard to answer, just so you know, the scope of service and track. And we had spoken about how do you track. So I think the best way to preface this is there were 3 memorandums that we cited also that were sent to the board also describing our tracking systems, our Google Docs. We presented this last March also when we began it. It has been implemented on secondary level. Aspen is used to track services. On the elementary level, everyone is responsible for entering any missed sessions and how they're going to make them up. They are supervised by the assistant principals and the principals who sign off on it. There was a question asked of, or do we do this with fidelity? Yes, we do. I can tell you that I read every form that comes in front of me. I check every date, I check every hour, and I check every service to make sure that there were no errors made. I can also tell you that the same expectation is for the administrators in each building. That covers the majority of those questions. In terms of data entry, in terms of Google Docs, that have been working, I think, from all the reporting coming back accurately and efficiently.
Katie. Thanks. Just coming back to the caseloads document that you had linked, I just want to reiterate that it's very hard to compare accurately numbers of caseloads because, as you said, that's really not the measure of how much work goes into it. So once again, it would just be really great if we could see them broken into service hours. I think that that's a clear picture. Like, looking at this, any person would ask, why does this provider have 8 and this provider has 24? So there's just not much that we can really gain without that data in the detail.
And again, perhaps the best way to think of it is if you think of allocation of time. So it may be if I'm a special education teacher and I have 9 kids in my caseload and I am working every period of that day with the exception of a prep and a lunch, I know that I am servicing collective bargaining time. And I think I mentioned that here, all my time is utilized. So I think if you broke down hours, if I told you that, actually Connecticut says breaks it by minutes now. If I told you that I have students with 42 hours worth of services, but in one group I have 2 students, in one group I have 5 students, or I'm a middle school teacher and I have 7 students or 12 students, I'm not quite sure how I could better inform the distribution other than their allocation of schedule and time. I'm open to any suggestions, but I don't know how else to do that.
I was just suggesting total hours instead of total cases. So whether student A requires 2 hours and student B requires 20, then that's 22.
Maybe I'm missing something, but I mean, if it's a higher caseload, can't we assume that on an average, the students would have less time spent? I guess that's where I'm looking at 5 versus 16. I guess
I guess what I would say is that you don't know. There would be assumptions built into this, and it's a very different thing than, for example, another discussion that we've had this year is which teachers are teaching 4 classes, which teachers are teaching 5, right? Like as we're talking about workload across the board.
sorry,
yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you up.
It's hard to know from here because you would be making assumptions as opposed to looking at actual data.
I guess my assumption is that their day is filled.
That's what I was trying to say.
Collective,
Look at their
through their
schedule.
collective bargaining.
So my question then is, what do we have teachers who are because of their caseloads coming in before school, after school? You know, we've heard about staffing shortages and differences. Like, I would just like to see the data exactly for what it is, as opposed to guessing at what it suggested.
I'm really saying I don't think informing the hours will help give a different understanding of the data because the data is that they're working. I can tell you they're working every period. Teachers do put in to do evaluations before and after school so they don't miss sessions. And that's the purpose of those times that they come in for. So that's something that we support because we don't want as many missed sessions for our students. However, I can tell you that they're working indefatigably all day long, in which their collective bargaining is, with the exception of lunch and a prep.
Katie, are you looking to validate that there are not any teachers with hours over and above their collective bargaining agreement? I understand there's a component of student work that we are not able to capture because we have a lot of talented professionals who will put in time over and above. So I'm trying to get to the use of the data. I understand the question.
Yeah, I would say that my concern is that we are not adding any special education teachers in this budget. So this chart in front of me is very hard for me to know if our teachers are overworked, if this is sustainable, if they are facing burnout. I know that they work really hard. I know that they work all day. That's not my concern. I'm not looking for anybody who's slacking off at all. I'm simply wondering if they don't need more support. And I'm saying that this table in front of me does not make that clear.
Okay.
Would you capture the extra workload if they're doing it of the goodness of their heart? I mean, how would you, I'm trying to figure, you pay overtime?
We don't, well, we allow teachers to do evaluations in overtime because they don't want to miss their kids during the day.
Right. Okay.
That's why we do it. So they're not missing sessions.
So you create some capacity. Sorry, you finished.
Right. And not all teachers are available to do that. They have their own families and their own time, but there are some teachers who do that. When there's a shortage, for instance, because we were short psychologists, I'll have psychologists go over and do an evaluation after school. Yeah, so it's not their caseload though.
No, but that does happen sometimes, surely, right? Where a student has an increased need and has a full schedule, and so will come in if the teacher is willing to receive services before school.
Yeah. And that's part of extended school day. I mean, PPTs can recommend extended school day also, where teachers are in agreement to provide those services beyond the school day. But that's part of the PPT recommendation. Okay. Teachers are willing to do that. But it's not because I don't think that's because they're overloaded. I think it's because we're recommending extended school day or evaluations after the school day.
So
I will certainly go back and think if there's any way that we. can
maybe
to John's
Marge,
question.
Rich, and Shirley could put their heads together and understand what the question is. There's a concern about increased identification and the fact that there's not increased staff. And is there a way for the board to validate that we're staffed correctly?
I'll gladly do that.
Thank you. Okay, are we at the end of those questions? I think we are. No, I'm on the wrong page. No, I'm going.
I think we're good.
Joe?
Oh, I just wanted to mention on the pencil whipping one, I did Google it because I didn't know what pencil whipping was on one of the questions. Yes, we did.
I did that today.
Okay, you'll and I can tell you with assurance, I never pencil whip, okay, ever. I love to know that every single thing I'm signing off has fidelity and then the support. That's my job. That's my responsibility.
Robin.
Just one question, and I apologize if I missed this in the presentation, but we were going over in the finance committee this morning, pupil evaluations increased $85,000 year to date. I'm interested just to see if we could see any kind of a breakdown on where all the percentage of referrals, how many typically are coming from parents versus teachers versus psychologists, just in general, and what is that trend? Thank you.
The evaluation that was adjusted for new rates. The evaluations are just more expensive. So
They're almost double.
to understand that piece of it too. I don't know that it was so many more, is that the ones that we're doing are that much more expensive.
But I can run that number.
yes, if we
I can
can
run
get
that
all that,
number.
that'd be
But
great.
it
Yeah,
was that
Rich
they,
didn't know the answer, I was just
they
curious.
have almost double the price, especially neuropsychs.
Okay.
And that's all post-COVID, actually. If you remember, there was a great shortage at that time also, and they're across the board almost double.
So evaluations, that's what we do,
neuroscience.
contracted as opposed to
Our
in-house?
in-house, yes.
But the
So it might be a
in-house is-
psych, in-house.
In-house is double
but our
also?
staff. No, it's some of our staff. There's no additional payment unless
Right.
they're working after school.
The pupil eval
That's why I'm-
account is
I'm-
The eval is an
contracted.
outside vendor.
Oh, so it's a contracted
Yes.
pupil evaluation, that's an outside.
So it
oh,
can be
okay.
neuropsychs, it can be psychiatric evaluations, it can be oral motor evaluations,
Okay.
auditory processing evaluations. And
Okay,
I think
so-
I mentioned last time those did not increase.
It's a little after 9:30. I don't want us to get too tired. We have a few questions on here. You want to go through some of the tracking and the verification, Shirley, quickly and see if there's any questions on that, and then let's switch topics.
I'll take any questions. I think I answered most of them in terms of our Google Doc that we're using successfully and Aspen for secondary.
Katie?
You said that the building admin were the one that checked them. At the middle school and high school level, do the current department chairs have access to those documents?
No.
No, it's just, it skips them and goes to the AP?
It goes to the APs and or the principal, whoever's designated.
Can't see Dave. Michelle, does Dave have any questions here?
Sorry?
Is Dave have any questions, Dave?
He's not on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move on to further discussion of 24-25 proposed budget and follow-up questions. Once again, I think we'll move fairly quickly, really, if folks need clarification or additional information on a question.
I think we're starting with January 15th, Michelle. I would just,
I have a question. Are we going by RC or how are we doing this?
I do not believe these are by RC. They're not.
The ones from the 15th?
They're just as you see them in this order here.
The ones from last meeting were by RC, right?
I don't believe these are them.
But these are not.
Right, yes. These January 15th,
So these are some follow-up from the board.
correct.
Okay.
Okay, so the department chairs and allocate, we had a wee bit of a discussion about this in terms of the actual administration at the high school compared to other school systems. You can see it broken out there. We have 0.8 8 FTE allocated to the high school and 0.2 of the department
Can we
chair.
put it up on the
screen? So, that's with, that shows you with the allocation of 0.8 and 0.2, and if you add an additional assistant principal. If you change the allocation to what it really is, which is 50-50, right? So really the department chairs spend 50% of their time at the high school, 50% of their time at the middle school. With an additional assistant principal, it's 175, and without it, it's 186.
Okay, so my point is we're still in the middle of the dirt.
Yes.
Just overall. So that was one just reason I was thinking about the potential to use department chairs to help with the PPT load as part of what you're proposing for the reorg, just as another option to talk about.
Can I just, we were talking about that, but we don't currently do it. I know they're qualified, but it's not our practice to use department heads in the PTTs. So, without, can they, you didn't hire for that expertise. You haven't done any professional development for that. Is it something that you can?
John, they're gonna answer that more fully.
Okay.
The short answer is I'm not recommending it, and I won't be recommending it, but.
You're gonna answer it more fully later.
Well, I'm sorry,
Keep going.
did I miss the?
They promised to put something together
Okay.
with a more fulsome response.
I mean, we're making an assumption that I'm not sure is fully baked.
Okay. As you were, Alan. Oh, Dave. Hi, Dave.
Hey, thanks. I'm just wondering if this spreadsheet here, this ratio, what's the calculation? Is that students to total admin or one of the subset? I'm just not following the number.
Students to total support.
Total. All right. Thanks.
So there's a similar one for the middle school. And again, with this team allocation, it would be 115 with the 3 assistant principals. If we change the allocation rate. But again, it falls out pretty much the same thing as you mentioned. Durga administration with enrollment is the second question. I just want to keep going here. Tell me to stop. That we've sort of discussed this chart before. It was referenced before a little bit. We are certainly more like Westport in how we do business because they have department chairs. They also have a part of a program director. Our elementary principals, assistant principals, certainly is sets us apart a little bit, but that was a conscious choice that we made to go in that direction for the purpose that we did, and I think that has served us well. But it mirrors more of a Westport structure than the other models. I'm just going to keep going. Professional development, the historical spending for technology, tech ed, and ELP has essentially been the same. I think that was the question. We're back to a pre-K question, comparable tuitions. We had a public comment on that this evening. So that was the information that was asked for. We were asked for a day in the life of an assistant principal. The 2 principals at the middle school and high school took a week and actually played that out a little bit as being a wee bit more representative of the request. So if you, the first page of DHS scheduled meetings during the week, this is only for meetings that were pre-scheduled. So it doesn't deal with supervision. It doesn't deal with being in the cafeteria. It doesn't deal with things that come up, meetings that come up, phone calls that come up. Students never make bad decisions to deal with those types of situations, bullying situations. They're not pre-scheduled events. And this was for the 3 assistant principals at the high school for this particular week. You can see that somebody's meeting with director of facilities. Well, another principal may be meeting with the clubs and councils, but this just gives you a sense of some of their scheduled meetings for that particular week. The same is for the middle school. So just a wee difference here in style that the high school did for the 3 assistant principals, the middle school did for the 2 assistant principals and the principal. So I just want to make sure that you're not completely comparing apples to oranges here.
Just a question. I know earlier you talked about like that. Someone said 40% of the reason why assistant principals are not out and about, which I think makes total sense that they should be, is because they're in PPT meetings or other things related to special education. Is that's the key driver? What's the other 60% of the reason why they're not out and about?
So some of these, you can see here some of these PPTs. But just to clarify a point here, that 1 week, the next week it could be a significant different number. That significantly impacts their ability to be out in the classrooms and teaching and learning and supporting students. But what was the second part of the question, Greg?
I was just trying to understand what 40% is due to that. What's the rest of it?
Well, I'm not saying they're in their office like all day. I mean,
Yeah.
actually, to be honest, that's a wee bit of a flippant comment. They're maybe not even pleased with me with that, but I'm just telling you that there does need to be a greater presence. They do all the things that we have mentioned in here, from parent meetings to following up with discipline, team meetings,
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to understand is like, what's the driver of them not being able to be out there, so that I can make sure that if we're going to add another assistant principal, that's actually going to solve the problem.
Right. Well, I think I should mention a good portion of it is special education in terms of how they're tied up in the PPE process.
So let's relate that to the earlier request to them to come up with some meaningful measures of success. And I think one would be, however, we're going to, some of that explicit connection to curriculum and instruction, and however we're looking at being out in the hallways, more successfully dividing up special education as some of the examples. But I think those are the things we'll be looking for 30, 60, 90 days, a year out.
Yeah.
And so we had a question about the paraprofessionals, and there you can see how the finances play out.
Just one question on that, because that ties into the addition of 10 building subs. So currently, I believe we have 2 open positions for building subs. One of my questions is, what likelihood, or do we feel like we will have a difficult time recruiting 10 building subs if we're going to be proposing a reduction of the 10 paraprofessionals at elementary?
So by nature, building subs can be transient, which is why we've decided to offer a retention bonus. We've actually had more success filling them this year because we did raise the daily rate and now offer health insurance, and that's why we've priced them even a little bit higher for next year. I've also found that we've had some success posting on Indeed, so we've been doing that as well. So we do feel relatively confident with the structure we created.
So just one question. So we are providing health insurance for building subs, because I had thought we were not.
So we offer health insurance, but by and large, they don't take them.
Thank you.
I think that completes January 15th.
Actually, no, the middle school class reductions. I wanted to talk about that schedule and the embedded
Yes, that's
link.
that's the next section.
Oh, is that the 16th?
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
okay, though. It's hard to, there's a lot of questions coming in different days. May I just proceed? Right. January 16th. So middle school class reductions. So we worked up some class reductions as shown in the actual table itself. I will say this, and we are looking to maintain the teams. So we're moving forward with devising a schedule that actually maintains the teams. So there was a question about that. I'll just put that on the table. That's what the principal, the school would like to do. And so we could do that. And I think there was a concern whether, yes, there would be a change in some more teachers having to teach in other grade levels, but it still fundamentally maintains the team structure. It doesn't impact what the students see. So this particular enrollment here you can see on the left-hand side is the current enrollment. The right-hand side is our
Can
summary
we
reductions.
pull it up on the screen, please?
Yes, flipping back and forth.
Right, while they're pulling that up, Dave, did you have a question?
I did. Wait, really quick. Alan, you said you're looking to maintain the teams. Is that a definite? We're not changing the teams, or we're looking to just trying to figure out the level of definitivity there?
We believe we can do that. In fact, I'm pretty confident we can do that. The principal would like to do that. So I'm pretty confident that is what we will actually do.
So it's a lock. We can take it off the table. No parents need to be concerned, or?
Well, I wouldn't take a concern off the table completely. Some people may be concerned, or maybe another teacher has to teach across grade levels, and that's true for some of the subjects. But the idea of maintaining the same number of teams, that's the direction we would be going.
Same number of teams, but not the same number of staff. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I see Katie, then Robin, then Julie, then Sarah.
Thank you. Alan, when you said that you're looking at schedules, how will you build those out? And will they be teacher schedules or student schedules?
Will it be both? We'd have to run a schedule with the student schedules.
So will you be building that out in-house?
We will be, yes, we will. The consultant will be coming to assist the principals in that exercise.
Okay, so not in-house, you would be paying the consultant $100,000 for that?
I'd be paying the consultant $100,000 would be correct. For a $900,000 efficiency, yes.
Well, if it's passed.
If it's passed, correct.
That's always assumed. Robin?
Well, one question, is the 100,000 also for the elementary proposed
Yes.
efficiency as well? Okay, so the question I had about what's up on the screen, if you page down to the English, it left off all of grade 8 English, including regular English and accelerated English for grade 8. And one of the reasons I'd like to see that is because there's an enrollment projection for 8th grade that's an increase of 30 students. And one question I have is, again, getting to the question of how are we anticipating reducing FTEs if we have that kind of an increase? Will we still be able to have teacher capacity to teach across grades, across levels for instance, math or English, including accelerated? Because I would think that it requires a certain level of expertise with teachers if you're going to have that kind of flux going on.
So Rich, can you just answer the student numbers, and Alan, the more.
So the reason like English 8, for example, is not shown is there would be no FTE reduction proposed in that area. So the total FTE reduction for English is a 1.0. So what you're getting is 2 sections in English A, 2 sections in English B, and then 1 section in English 7.
Okay, so no teacher reduction for grade 8 for English.
Correct.
Oh, okay. But we would still be, we still would be offering accelerated English for 8th grade and
Yep,
regular.
so the same-
English.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. If Dr. Dahlstrom is still on, I'd love to get a better sense, and from Amy and Alan too. I would love to get a better sense of what effect having more rainbow teachers has, on the day-to-day, and on the student. Because I know we all know the team structure is very expensive, but part of the beauty of this team structure is making sure that the same group of teachers can meet regularly about the same group of children. So if there are more rainbow teachers, how does that affect the student monitoring?
I'll let Carolyn answer, but they'll basically impact probably one more teacher, each teacher. Yes, but to have the cross, but I'll let Carolyn answer.
We have a couple rainbow teachers now, mostly in math, and they still have times to meet with at least one of the teams that they're working with. It does just mean getting a little creative of how they can meet with the teams to discuss the students. But so far, it really hasn't been an issue. And then I know Alan just mentioned looking at a potential cross grade level team, which if that did happen, they would be a team. So they would still have a team time, even if they were discussing multiple grade levels. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does, but then that creates more questions for me, because if you have an intergrade level team, how do you do like the team days and the grade level, that kind of stuff, like there's
So
more questions.
May I suggest that we get a little bit of a write-up on that and then follow up with questions? And if folks want to throw some things they might want to see in that write-up out, they can, but I think that's probably the best way to handle that, because I would imagine there are quite a few questions. I forget who's next.
I think it was me.
Okay.
Thank you. So my questions are on this chart and around averages, because I'm still not understanding. I mean, our averages weren't terrible in the first place. So I look at this and it doesn't necessarily tell me that we've evened out in actuality what class by class is going to look like. And I will connect that question to something we heard in public comment tonight, which I believe the question was only 30% of the classes that are significantly undersized presently were in core curriculum. And yet we're only talking about cutting core teachers, but saying that we're going to solve our class size problem. So I need to understand that. I also want to know what we mean by music here. At the middle school, I believe we have band, orchestra, musical exploration, and chorus. So those are all different teachers is my understanding. So I don't know what we're lumping into music and if that works in practice off the page. And then I had one other thing and I can't think of what the heck it was. Oh, we had a handful of French classes that were really quite large, and I don't see any mention of addressing that in here either. In that list of undersized and oversized classes. So if we could learn more about those things, please.
Again, this is when we give you averages, we're not trying to not be fully transparent about stuff, but this is, we're talking about sort of average class size. I would say at the high school or the middle school, or even at the elementary school, an average class size, clearly there can be outliers here and there along the way.
I understand. I guess what I'm struggling with is, I think we can look at the numbers and say, yes, we have classes that are smaller than they ought to be, and we should adjust that, but we haven't to date been able to do that. So I'm trying to get to a place where I believe that what's on the table now can actually accomplish that, because if we don't know yet that it can, I'm not ready to make those changes until we've figured out how it will. So that's where I am.
So you've got 18 to 24 for class size. And that's a general guideline for middle school class sizes. This doesn't go up to 23, doesn't go up to 24, it plans on 22.
Okay.
To try and give a level of confidence, that is why we went out for the best person we could find to actually do this. I have every confidence that we can do this, and we can't do a schedule in advance in time for the board to say, here's the schedule. Yes, you ask the questions, yes, you get the answers back. I'll answer as much as I can, as good faith as I can, but all I'm telling you is that I'm very confident that we can do this, given the information and the research that's been done. The person is going to come on site, work side by side with their principals to execute it as early as we possibly can, actually, because they want them to come in very early. The music, just an update today, they've reviewed the music again, and we're happy with where the music levels of staff stand. So I hear the concern, I understand the concern. It is, you're not going to be left with a schedule that doesn't work. It's not going to happen.
Just a couple of questions. One, with this proposal, is this also assuming that all the teachers will teach 5 courses, or is this a schedule that we're working out, assuming that they would do kind of the status quo and then use extra time for extra help or
So the teachers,
SRBI?
you can't require the teachers to all teach 5. It can only be done through attrition as teachers leave. So this will still have some teachers teaching 4 and some teachers teaching 5.
Okay.
But we will have 2 FTE cumulative 2 FTEs of additional intervention time and assistance and help for students.
Okay, and then the existing, some people have mentioned the fourth grade class, and this has to kind of do with the COVID cohort of students who I think were kindergarten when COVID happened, and, you know, the learning loss potentially as they age into middle school, which I think happens in 2 years. With this kind of proposal, even if our enrollment is not growing at as high a rate as we, you know, to kind of like do this analysis of average class sizes, et cetera, are we confident that this teaching kind of scheduling will allow us to ensure that the learning of the students is adequate for those areas, especially if we've got large cohorts coming in that might have had that kind of experience?
But even when we look back to the class sizes back some years ago, we're still not going to be able, we're still not coming to there's a slide in my original presentation, we're still not coming close to those. And whether it was the fourth graders coming through or whether it's a fifth graders coming in the sixth grade, I'm not going to sacrifice interventions, learning, or any aspect of teaching and learning that's going to water that down for any group of kids, let alone kids who've lived through COVID.
Thank you.
Rich, can you roll the enrollment forward for us so that we can see what it looks like 2
Sure.
years out? With
I mean,
the
I will say, even with that cohort of fourth graders moving up, you're still at a lower enrollment than you were in fiscal year 20. And in fiscal year 20, you were still well below the class size guideline.
Okay, thank you.
And can you model it with whatever expected attrition we have, so I can also see what the impact on SRBI is? Right, because if we have attrition. Thank you. Katie?
So we currently have students who are on off-team classes, and I'm curious what the numbers are on that currently for this year and how we might expect them to potentially increase next year.
Did someone on my team capture that? I just want to make sure.
I didn't get it, so.
How many off-team kids are there?
Oh, how many kids are in off-team classes this year? And how many would we project might be in off-team classes next year with this proposed change?
Thank you.
Okay. So next question is the SEL ruler, a question in terms of what the expenditures are for 25. We've just listed them there. The total is 34,000, but they're broken out for you.
Sorry, did you skip?
Oh, did I skip something? I apologize.
Software.
Oh, so the software, yes. This was there was no easy answer to be able to do this right away. But ones that were spot checked had 70% of the students were using them. I will say that these were some that we have discontinued. Every year we go through each piece of software, whether we currently have it or whether it's new. And as a team go through a process of validating, do we really need this, in case we have to go back to the source we asked for it and so on. But there just wasn't an easy answer to it, but I'll leave it at that for a moment and see if any other follow-up questions.
On the one before this, how many FTEs were there in 2019?
Before the software.
Nursing.
Sorry, nursing. What year, sorry?
2019.
Prior to COVID, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. So it just hasn't changed at all. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to skip over. Job descriptions are as listed. I'll have to get one. Marge, I think there's one for the new music director, visual arts, and so on.
I'll have to provide that one.
So we've provided what we have at the moment. Okay. Top-down initiatives, you'll respect I didn't ask the president of the union explicitly, but these are the ones, if he wants to comment on them, certainly make. But these are the ones that we have tried to say list from administratively what we see you want to call them initiatives, we try to be completely transparent about what we're doing. Those are the ones that we would say.
And we do, the board has received something from Mr. Palmer. Thank you.
Next question.
Yes. Yes.
I just have, pardon? No, I had a question on this item, if that's okay, or even just, I just wanted to call out that it's something I'd like to have a conversation about in the future, because when we talk about this question of what other things did we consider, when a proposal, I'm using the royal we again, what other things did you all consider when you bring us a recommendation, for example, for another assistant principal? What other levers do we look at? Do we look at how many initiatives we have going on, and is the pacing of them more aggressive than it needs to be? Or is the compilation of people on those teams larger than they need to be? Are we asking more than we have to in some of these cases? And I think that's something that, not right now in deciding this budget, but something that would be worth looking at as we move forward.
That's also come up in contract negotiations.
Those were the questions that are received, January 16th.
Dr. Edley, I don't know where these questions were, because I know that I saw them somewhere. Can I just ask a question? At one point I saw an elementary specials breakout showing how the formulas were done for music, art, PE by school.
Those were the January 6th questions that we haven't done yet.
Or are we doing those next?
So I have the January 6th questions. If you recall that we went through those and went through them relatively quickly. If anybody wants to call up anything on that.
Just one. Just one question, and this had to do with music at Tokenique. Looking at the number of anticipated sections, Tokenique ended up with less teachers than Holmes or Hindley, even though they have around the same number of sections. And I was just wondering how that would work. I guess Tokenique would end up with 1.5 music teachers versus Holmes and Hindley that had 2. And I just was trying to understand the methodology and how they were planning that. That's just a specific.
Robin, do you happen to have the question there? I have the questions here and the answers here. I just looked at the.
Somehow I don't have the sheet
Oh,
of
so
paper.
So, Robin,
Yes.
did it look like this? Did you see that all the way across the room?
Yes.
So it was the elementary specials formula that was included to illustrate how this, in the absence of a schedule, how what's being proposed could work in practice. Marge, I think
What
those were
RC
your
was it?
formulas.
Those are mine.
It's specific to the elementary school specials, but
RC
the
5 through
question
10.
came under, sorry, I have way too much paper happening. Do you remember, Marge, what question?
I don't, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll get there. Give me one sec.
Oh, I have the sheet of paper.
I have it in front of me. I just can't see the question. That's all.
Magnifying glass for that one.
It's in the January 6th packet, right?
It's in the January.
Page 4.
Thank you. Support staff formula. So it's 5:10 support staff formula. No, 5:10 is elementary specials formula.
That's right. Page 4. Elementary specials formula.
Can you just pull that up?
Yeah. So further down on the page, at the very bottom, kind of where they're showing school by school. So, right, so I was looking at Tokenique, which is kind of the last one that's
Yes.
shown.
Yeah.
And what I did was to say, okay, with these changes, what is the ending proposed number of music teachers? And this spreadsheet is not really showing what happens, but basically Tokenique has a cut of 0.4, which would end up with 1.5 teachers versus Henley and Holmes, which end up with 2. And my point was that the number of sections for Tokenique is going to be 22, which is the same as Holmes, and Henley's 21. But they both had 2 music teachers, and Tokenique ended up with 1.5. So it didn't seem to correlate with the number of sections, and I'm just trying to understand how that decision was made or how that works.
Maybe I'll just take it offline.
Yeah, that's fine.
I have questions on this also though, while we're here.
Okay.
A couple things. Well, I'm still waiting for more information on how music works. The problem again, that all of music is lumped in together, and to understand how that's not going to impact and therefore change the student experience of our music programs. Extra art is something that's mentioned in here, but it doesn't look like it's baked into the analysis. I'm not entirely certain what extra art means, but it's in the inputs on this formula, and I would like to understand that better. The formula has music exclusive of lessons, but then it has teachers inclusive of music lessons. So that's part of the confusion. Are these all shortage areas? And what is the challenge in finding, keeping, or replacing a 0.2 or a 0.4? Some of these partial physicians, I'm sure that's not the right lingo, forgive me. And I mean, I guess I come back again to kind of what I said about Middlesex. I don't understand if we can do this now, why we didn't do it before. So I'm stuck on that. I don't mean to be obtuse, but I'm stuck there. Sorry. And I had one last question. A couple years ago, we were talking about adding phys ed resources at the elementary level. I don't remember where we landed on that. Did we add more
No.
PE? Okay, so that didn't pass, so we
At the
stayed.
high school level, I think we're at it.
No, we've talked about it at
Didn't add.
elementary too. High school, I know we've talked about it and
So
it
you-
didn't go through.
You didn't add at the high school, you did add at the elementary.
So we did add
We added
it.
a 0.4.
A 0.4. That was 2 years ago, is that right? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we added a 0.4 then and, okay. So those are my questions that I still look.
So the Middlesex, we could have reduced realized these efficiencies earlier. We could. Again, given where we were, we have a lot of turnover, principal turnover, assistant principal turnover. We had COVID up there. And obviously we've lived through those periods of time. And I was willing to work with the schedule as it was, right? And you can say, well, we should have done it earlier, okay? I just felt that it was reasonable to continue to work at that level. It's not as if we were hiding it. We presented every year here what the classroom sizes were, right? They were, but I just felt that it wasn't the right time to make that move with the number of turnover of administrators that we've had. Coming out of COVID, okay, give a little bit of a pass, and I didn't think that was a time to make a reduction either. But I think it is now. And actually, again, if the board changes something here in terms of, I'll still be bringing a recommendation if we have to reduce something or otherwise. I would still be looking at those class sizes, unless the board tells me we're changing the class size ratios. I just think it's incumbent to we'll be looking at impacting student programming most likely if we have to do it some other way.
Marge, did you want to say something?
I did, and I can put this in writing, Jill, if you'd rather not do it now, but I can answer most of Julie's questions.
If it's pretty quick, fire away.
Okay, it's pretty quick. So a few years ago, instead of having art for 60 minutes a day, art was changed to 45 minutes in a 6-day cycle. So in order to not reduce instructional minutes, what they did was there are extra art classes that teachers can pick up so that the number of total minutes of art in a year is the same. So when I did the formula, I still use the 60 minutes because even though it's 45 now plus extra, the total for the year per section is 60. So Mr. Levinson knows that and knows about the extra art, and we can still staff it. As far as shortage areas, the only shortage area in any of these special areas is elementary Spanish, and we're not doing anything. There'll be one full-time teacher at each school. As far as music goes, some of this includes the lessons. Amy and I have spoken to Colleen Thompson, who feels confident that she has enough still with the cut excess capacity to staff general music and all of the lessons that we have. But when you see partial, like 1.2s and 1.3s, those will be itinerant teachers. We won't be hiring 0.2s or 0.3s. We did add PE resources. I think that we're used to scheduling with some pretty generous assumptions about travel time and other time. And I think that Mr. Levinson will help us streamline those assumptions, and we'll be able to reduce staff accordingly.
Let me just add one thing. General music has the same amount of minutes in a 6-day cycle as PE, but currently has more FTE than PE, which is why you're seeing the reduction in music.
Thank you.
And just to clarify again, the efficiencies that we're looking at the elementary school are like 2.4 versus like plausibly 12 you could be looking at. So like we're given a good cushion of implementation here, and it's the same at the middle schools, 5.6 versus 6.8 or even up to 15. So again, we're being conservative. And I think reasonable as we make this approach.
Dr. Adley, just to follow up on Julie's point, I just think it would be helpful if we could see, for instance, for band orchestra at the elementary schools, because those typically they're a little bit different in terms of the teacher expertise and, whether you can make a cut or not. So just how that would work would really be helpful.
So the cut is for general music. We're not cutting orchestra or band or choral, any lessons. The cut is to general music. And after we make the proposed cut, if it's approved, we will have still excess capacity to give us an appropriate cushion.
Thank you.
Katie. I'm curious if someone could speak to, and I know I asked this before, but we received some communication and concern, but can someone speak to the way that adaptive PE classes will be scheduled and how these changes will realistically impact them? I mean, to be honest, I'm having trouble taking this from the abstract time into the reality of a schedule and how it works on a practical way. This one is very hazy for me. So if we could have some color on the practical application and specifically to that cohort of students. The board received an email that was a little troubling about providing students with what they need under very challenging circumstances.
We can certainly look at the number of sections for APE that we currently have based on our cohort of students and move it forward.
Thank you. Okay.
Joe?
Yes.
Are we open for other general questions on?
Yes.
Other RCs, or are we still going through?
Well, are we closed down on January 6th, or do you want to?
Yes, Katie. Sorry, I have to find it again. I just had it. In the response to the numbers of enrollment for art and music, I am curious about how, I'm sorry, I still don't, okay, here we go. Question 14, I think. So when you look at this, it's quickly apparent that the art enrollment outweighs the music enrollment at the high school significantly. And I'm curious about, again, how this proposed change works in reality, of combining two. And this is another one where, honestly, for all of them, I would love that same level of detail, Marge. That was really helpful, what you put at the bottom of the slide with this one moves into that and this is posted. Is this a new posted job?
Visual
Director of Visual Arts. This is newly posted?
So we're in discussions with the administrators union now about whether this is a redefinition or something that requires to be posted.
Okay,
So-
great. Well, I'd love to hear that once it's been determined. Thank you. So anyway, this is the type of thing where I think there's a lot of layers. One is that you're going from having expertise in two subjects into combining into one. And if this, at least the way anecdotally it sounded to me, if this was a redefinition under the current music, now they have more students outside of their industry. And then additionally, it's really, really hard for me to understand how there won't be budgetary implications for someone to take on an entire another department, especially one outside of their expertise. How is that not going to come with salary expectations? And I believe Rich said that there would be an opportunity for them to renegotiate. So how does that get built into the budget? Like,
So we did set aside the equivalent of 10 extra days. It is in contract support because it isn't necessarily final, which is why you don't necessarily see it in the RC 13.
so what would the dollar amount of
It's a
that?
little over $7,000.
7?
Yeah.
So I just think that like the nuance of this needs to be considered, because it's not as simple as saying gone is 0.2 and this is just absorbing it.
Yes, John.
I'm going to channel a former chair that says we don't budget bodies or personalities, we budget FTEs. So when we talk about specific individuals taking on different roles, we shouldn't be. We should be just talking about an FTE.
Well, if I said it in that way, my apologies. I did not mean specifically person name to person name. I did mean the role, that if you are changing the role from being music only to now being music and art, everything I said applies.
Okay. Any other questions in January 6th document? If not, we can flip over to any folks who have remaining RC questions. And I would say, let's try to keep it to a pretty tight question that can be answered as follow-up.
Robin. So I'm kind of looking also at the RTM education, the questions that were sent to us, because I thought that there were some really good points that were raised.
No.
I don't think she was talking to us.
Oh, sorry.
And I think this is RC1. I mean, the education committee was suggesting that we should potentially think about increasing the parking fee more than what we had, and they mentioned Ridgefield at 200. I would like to ask for the data about what additional revenue that would make if we did decide to do that, and I don't know if we're open to that
It'd
at
be
this
about
point.
$13,000.
Sorry?
It'd be about $13,000.
13, okay. Another question on RC12. Again, this was also suggested by the RTM. If we charge similar to Westport or Greenwich for the rental fees for the gyms, DHS and middle school, how much additional revenue would that be?
So we don't typically rent out the gyms because they're used. So the area where if you were to raise fees and make more money is the participation fees for youth sports and camps on the field.
Okay. Oh, and then one other question, just on RC 19, the responsive classroom, $25,000 of professional development. Can you give more information on why that's needed, or is there a less expensive option available?
You'll probably do that right now.
There is the 2023 legislative summary included an update on what school districts need to provide to support social emotional learning. One of those opportunities is the use of responsive classroom. It does align very much to our elements of vision of the graduate and the values of the school system. In addition, it will align to the work in the area of restorative practice, which is another mandated requirement.
But there's not a less expensive alternative for than the 25,000 that's in the budget. Is that correct?
There are, I don't know that I have priced out other options. There are, what I would say is this isn't the only program that we use. There are other materials that are really a compendium of resources that our teachers and counselors and psychologists use to meet student needs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else have additional questions? Okay.
Yes, Kate, thank you. So a different question, but on here is the loss of the elementary curriculum coordinator. My question around this is, in looking to eliminate an FTE from administration and within that department, I was wondering if you could give your reasoning for why you chose that one and not the director of elementary education. If we're talking FTEs and we're talking budget constriction, the director salary is twice what the coordinator is. So if you're adding 5 more, people to help with curriculum in the way of teacher leader stipends, and you're keeping one position, why would you not cut the higher salary position?
Well, I can answer that, or you can answer that, whatever. You can answer, go ahead.
I'll give my answer and then please certainly Dr. Adley add on to it. I think it's critically important to have someone who can provide consistency and oversight across 5 elementary schools so that there's coherence and implementation of curriculum and instruction. So that would be one primary reason.
Yeah, look, listen, again, I'll say what I said. This is the second position that if I could keep, I would keep, right? But if you're asking me to reduce that one with replacing them with some curriculum specialist versus the director of elementary education, and I just can't, right? We're in the middle of reading legislation. Honestly, I'd be cutting off Amy's arms and legs really a little bit for support. You couldn't execute on what we were doing. You just couldn't do it.
Right. Right. If there are additional questions, board members are certainly welcome to email them in. With that, we will move to, we don't have a public comment, so.
Just Jill, I forgot one question, and this again was in the RTM questions. Just curious, I know we talked about the participation fees at one point in the fall, but there was a note in the RTM questions about, the DERG the answer was talking about 50% of our DERG does charge participation fees for athletics. I was just curious what schools those are and what they charge.
So Ridgefield does charge at $200. Weston charges at $100 and Wilton charges at $150.
I mean, we have a whole analysis that we could provide.
So, so to split the DERG, it's Weston, Ridgefield, and Wilton do. We do not. Westport and New Canaan.
We could redistribute that analysis if you're interested. Yes,
just pulling out on one thing about public comment that I would like to have clarification on. And maybe we've seen this in all of our information, but how is the campus monitor role at the middle school? How are the responsibilities of that second campus monitor being redistributed?
Yep.
That was also a recommendation from our director of security. So just as a record.
Okay.
Sorry. Did we get information on how the ratios for coaches to players are determined? I don't remember seeing that.
A couple of years ago.
Did we ask that?
I mean, I know we asked for it. I'm not sure if it made it into.
There's something in the appendix, I think it's in the athletics RC that talks about safety or.
There are coaching ratios in RC 11. I think it's the last page.
Yeah.
The ratios are in there.
It says how many we have. It doesn't say,
It talks
doesn't
about the
talk about how
reason.
they're arrived at, what
Yeah.
the practice is.
But we've
or
had
the-
that before. That's based on per sport and the level of the sport.
Yeah.
We can ask for it again,
It's
but
in
we've
the
had it before.
appendix, or it's in the last page, and it talks about the reasons. So for instance, safety might be an issue, or, I mean, I know I read it, and I think it was in the RC. Yeah.
Well, if anyone finds it, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, let's see.
It was in the policy detail, I think.
If it's not responsive to your question, Katie, just please resend it. What's in here? Okay, all right. With that, it is just before 10:30. I will make a motion to adjourn.
We're doing public comment.
You know, we don't have any on the agenda. Thank you. We usually do, but we do not this evening have a second public comment. We will certainly have one. Dave is motioning to adjourn. Thank you, Dave. May I have a second? Greg seconds. All those in favor?
That was a second for you.